Hello and welcome back to my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 33, Mental Wounds. Ichigo's eyes were wide open in an instant, adrenaline running through his veins as his mind comprehended the first thing it could that morning: someone was attacking him. Aizen. There was no time to summon his trusty Zanpakuto. Moving from lying down to leaping forward, Ichigo's lashed out with his right hand. Successfully gripping his attacker's face, he used his forward momentum to plunge the man's head into the floor. Wait, that shouldn't have worked if it was Aizen. It must be an assassin from Soul Society. Anticipating the assailant's next move, Ichigo caught the enemy's punch with his left hand, before flipping the man over onto his front using his leverage over the man's face and arm, managing to pin him to the floor with the wizard's knees digging into the attacker's back. He was about to summon Zangetsu and cut off the assassin's head, but just then, Ichigo's brain caught up with his body. This was his usual morning ritual. Now recognizing the distinctive hair and the way the assassin was now saying loudly into the floor that he had nothing left to teach him, Ichigo sighed and released his father. "Dad, you had nothing left to teach me in terms of hand-to-hand combat months ago." Isshin brushed himself off, not having a scratch on him. "Good. You have the self-control to not kill someone if they catch you unaware." Ichigo was uncomfortably reminded of the fact that he was one of the most, if not the most, powerful being he knew, but he nodded seriously anyway. "Don't worry, everything will be fine. Aizen is dead, he is dead and won't come back," he reminded himself. "And it's too soon for Soul Society assassins." The ex-Daicho looked at his son in concern. "Are you alright?" "Yeah." Ichigo looked away. The words, "I'm fine," were on the tip of his tongue, but somehow they wouldn't come out. He sighed. "No." Isshin sat down on the wizard's bed. "Want to tell me?" Ichigo rubbed the back of his neck and looked up, his face strained. "Just a nightmare." "What happened?" "No getting out of this, I guess. Aizen tricked us all and faked his death again." Isshin nodded slowly. "I guess this might happen." He stood. "Ichigo, your mind and body are still operating as though you're fighting a war. Your nightmare is simply a symptom of the fact that you're tense, ready for life-or-death combat at less than a second's notice. You can't even see it, because to you this is your natural state now." "What do you mean?" Ichigo asked. "I mean that you should look at yourself. The way you're standing is as though you expect to be attacked at any second. Your muscles are tense, primed and ready to block and counterattack as soon as they register an attack," Isshin explained. "You look like you're on guard, waiting to be attacked." "Can you blame me for it?" the wizard demanded bitterly. "No," his father denied softly. "What I'm trying to say, Ichigo, is that you need to find a place, or an activity, something that you enjoy, that helps you relax. Being constantly battle-ready is an asset in war, Ichigo, but it has no place in peace." He put a hand on Ichigo's shoulder, looking him in the eyes. "It will be hard. It will feel like you're going against every single instinct in your body. You'll feel panicked and self-reproachful when you realize that you let your guard down. But you need to do this, Ichigo, if only for your own sanity." Half an hour later, Ichigo was walking to school, but his mind remained centered on his father's words. "Something that I enjoy and helps me relax." But what? Searching back through his memory, Ichigo was dismayed to realize that he didn't really have any hobbies, or relaxing activities or places. His life prior to meeting Rukia and becoming a Shinigami had been simple: school, family, beating off thugs, and hanging out with Chad, Kigo and Mizuiro. Occasionally he'd help out some ghost. Afterwards, he'd been a bit preoccupied with learning how to be a Shinigami, and then saving Rukia, and then training to protect his family, and then fighting Aizen. The closest thing Ichigo had to a fun pastime to taking satisfaction in kicking the butts of gangs who challenged him. But that was counterproductive to the whole point of relaxing, so Ichigo discarded the idea. Besides, he reasoned, it'll be good to do something besides fight. So, what to do? He was still pondering that by the time he reached the school, his head bowed in thought and his hair obscuring his eyes from sight. Oblivious to all the muttering of the students around him, he entered his classroom, taking his usual seat. A pointed voice broke through Ichigo's state of self-searching, forcefully bringing his attention back to the present. "Kurosaki," Ishida greeted. "Ishida." The pair nodded at each other before the Quincy took his own usual seat. Spotting a Quincy cross on the other young man's clothing, Ichigo suddenly remembered that Ishida was in the handicrafts club and was particularly good at sewing. So that's his way of reconnecting with life. The realization prompted Ichigo to think about his other friends. What did they do that they enjoyed? Inoue likes making weird food. Tatsuki likes karate. Chad plays bass guitar and listens to music. Mizuiro goes after older women. Kigo likes to play around and do whatever seems fun. But what about me? Something that I enjoy doing. Finally shrugging and figuring he had to look around and try new things, Ichigo finally brought his attention back to the real world, and suddenly realized that everyone was staring at him. "What?" he asked flatly. "Well, Kurosaki-san." One of the girls whispered nervously, despite one of her friends trying to shut her up with rapid hand signals. "We were wondering about your hair." "Ah." Ichigo hadn't thought about the impact his sudden aging would have concerning his school life. Of course his hair would be a noticeable change. The extra height would be noticeable soon too, but Ichigo was glad that his clothes still fit, though this was only because he bought them with a few extra inches in mind. But how to explain the rapid growth of his hair? "Wait, my reputation should help a bit here. I grew it out," he said simply. "But it wasn't nearly that long a few days ago when you last came to class." The same girl pointed out. "It should have taken months." "Apparently not. Listen." Ichigo trailed off, waiting for the girl's name. He wasn't sure they'd ever talked before, but he was horrible with names and it had been months to him, so he really couldn't tell. "Natsue Mihana." "Mihana-san, it has to do with the reason why I've been out of school for so long," Ichigo hedged. "Not really something I like talking about." "Mihana," the other girl hissed. "Come on." "Oh, alright, Michiru." Mihana relented, letting herself be pulled away. "By the way, Kurosaki-san, you look really cute with that hair." "How could you, Ichigo?" Kigo's voice demanded hysterically as he skidded to a stop from bolting into the room. "Mizuiro is taking all the older women, and now you're going to take all the ones in our grade?" Ichigo gave him a deadpan look. "It's not what you think, Kigo." He brought a hand to his forehead, massaging his temples to stave away a headache. "All I want right now is some peace and quiet." It was then that the teacher, Oki Misato, stepped in. "Everyone sit, it's time for roll call." Then her eyes spotted her worst offenders for skipping class. "Do my eyes deceive me?" she asked semi-seriously. "Sato, Ishida, and Kurosaki are all here today." "And Kurosaki, what happened to your hair?" Ichigo sighed. "I'd really rather not talk about it. Suffice to say it grew." "All right. Ishida, Sato, Kurosaki, stay after class, we need to discuss the effects of your absence." Ichigo groaned, but nodded. Class passed without incident, with Ichigo paying close attention to the lesson. Though it had only been a few days here, to him it felt as though a lifetime had come and gone. It was hard for Ichigo to remember the material from the last time he'd attended, which had been months ago to his perspective. But fortunately, as the class continued, Ichigo found the lesson not at all hard to follow, and he was able to remember more and more. The bell rung all too soon to signal lunch, and the students began to leave. As requested, the three defenders of Karakura stayed behind and stood in front of Oki-sensei's desk. "Let's start with Sato. Why were you absent for so long?" Chad thought quickly, trying to come up with a plausible reason. He couldn't exactly say that he was visiting the afterlife to go find his dead grandfather, and his fortitude was well known, so claiming illness was out of the question. "I was kidnapped while walking home," he fibbed in a low voice. I don't know by whom, or where I was taken, but somehow Ichigo found out and came to my rescue. I just got home yesterday. Why didn't you go to the police? Oki inquired Ichigo, turning to him. And say what? Ichigo demanded plainly, picking up the story. My 6.5-foot tall friend got kidnapped. By whom? I don't know, it could be any of the gangs that we beat up for picking on us. Throw in my orange hair and I'd get myself arrested before anything got done. Point, Oki admitted. So, who was it? Ichigo and Chad glanced at each other before Ichigo shrugged at his teacher. No idea. I found Chad in an abandoned warehouse. No one was there, and I took the opportunity to get us out rather than wait for them to come back. We don't go looking for fights, you know. And how did you find him? I know a few people, Ichigo said in an embarrassed voice. I can't believe I'm saying this. It sounds so corny. And people hear things. Ishida was astonished at how easily Kurosaki was able to lie to their teacher. Then again, Kurosaki did have a reputation as a hooligan, so it wasn't hard to believe that he knew some shady contacts, and it was well known that Chad was Kurosaki's best friend. Alright, Oki conceded, satisfied with the story. Ishida, has your family business issues been taken care of? Yes. In that case, let's keep your absences to a minimum from now on, all three of you, she warned. We haven't had any tests while you were gone, but I expect high marks from all three of you in the next few assignments, or else I will have to give you special makeup exams. Am I clear? Yes, Oki-sensei, the three of them agreed together. Then get out of here. And try to be more careful walking home, Sado. They made their way to the grounds where Inoue was waiting for them. You are so cliché, Kurosaki. I know a few people. And people hear things. Really? Hey, it worked, didn't it? Ichigo retorted. Give me a break. But Ishida was no longer listening, he'd suddenly had an idea. He couldn't use his Quincy powers anymore outside of maintaining his skills and saving lives, per his vow to his father. But here, perhaps, there was a way for him to aid in the protection of Karakura in a way that was not at all spiritual. He absently sat down next to Inoue, resolving to continue thinking about it later. Oh, Inoue! Ichigo exclaimed, suddenly remembering something. Would you mind coming with me to Urahara's today after school? We need your personal touch on something. Inoue looked at him questioningly for a moment before smiling and nodding. Sure. The rest of the class after lunch passed without issue, and soon enough Ichigo found himself with Inoue heading to the shop. So, what is it, Kurosaki-kun? The perpetually happy girl asked as the shop came in sight. Ichigo rubbed the back of his neck. There was really no easy way to ask this of her. Well. I'm sorry, Inoue, but we need you to use your powers to check Aizen's body to make sure it's not an illusion. Inoue gasped, stopping in her tracks and covering her mouth with her left hand. But. I know I said I killed him, Ichigo admitted quickly. It's just, we want to be sure, you know. Aizen's faked his death before, and we can't afford to be wrong. The teenage girl nodded slowly, obviously gathering her courage. Alright, Kurosaki-kun. Ichigo knocked on the door, and it opened almost immediately, Urahara just beyond the threshold. Come in, he beckoned. It's just in the back. Inoue began visibly trembling as they approached. Ichigo put a hand on her shoulder, startling her. It's okay, he reassured her. Nothing can hurt you here. She swallowed audibly, but entered the room. Thankfully, Urahara had placed a sheet over Aizen's headless corpse, and Ichigo watched with concern as Inoue almost collapsed in relief. She was afraid to see the body. Soten Kishun. The reality-rejecting shield materialized over the covered body quickly, and less than a minute later, Inoue nodded and called it back. There's no illusion, she reported. And it seems to be dissipating? Urahara nodded. Bodies of Shinigami do that after they've been killed. The erasure that make up their being dissipate into the air. It's our version of decomposition. Thank you, my dear, it seems that this truly is Aizen's body. Ichigo stepped between Inoue and the corpse. Thanks, Inoue. You've helped more than you know. Inoue gave him a confused look, but then smiled softly at his sincere expression. I'm glad I could help, Kurosaki-kun. If that's everything, I think I should head home now. Without waiting for a response, she quickly took her leave of the vicinity. Before Ichigo could follow, however, Urahara gripped his wrist, holding him back. Ichigo, are you alright? You look like you have something else on your mind. The wizard hesitated, but nodded a few seconds later. He related the conversation he'd had with his father that morning, before sighing. I just feel sort of, well, lost. When I look at everyone, I can see what they like doing. Chad has his music, Inoue her food, Ishida his tailoring, even you have your inventing and playing occasional harmless tricks. But I haven't really had anything but fighting and training, and that's kinda counterproductive. If I may make a suggestion. Sure, go ahead, Ichigo invited. While I was a Taicho of Soul Society, I did research on the bond between Shinigami and Zanpakuto in an effort to strengthen both, and there's a very interesting piece of trivia I found there. It seems that usually, a Shinigami's Zanpakuto has similar desires and interests to its Shinigami. If Zangetsu said anything, you might want to follow up on it, Urahara advised. You might find it to your liking as well. Ichigo took a moment to consider, remembering his past conversations with the blade of his soul. He gave the barest hint of a smile. Thanks, Urahara. Anytime, Ichigo. The shopkeeper led his young man he trained to the door. My door is always open to you, Ichigo. It's the least I can do. Thanks again. Ichigo held up an arm in farewell as he walked away, lost in thought. Zangetsu's mentioned he likes sunsets and stargazing, he recalled. It's a place to start. Interrupting his musings, a figure appeared in front of him with a flicker of Shunpa. Tensing, Ichigo was halfway to summoning his Zanpakuto when he recognized the Ryatsu, and the hairstyle. Ichigo narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Shinji. Ichigo, the wizard greeted. Mind taking a detour to the warehouse for a few hours? Fine, Ichigo accepted with a shrug. They began walking, and each was quiet for several minutes. So what's this about? The substitute finally asked. You'll see, Shinji responded mysteriously. The pair was silent the rest of the way to the warehouse, before the blonde wizard threw open the door, entering it. Ichigo followed a moment later. But Ichigo was completely taken aback when he saw all 7 of the other wizards standing in a military-style line. When the 7 immediately bowed to him, he was even more shocked. What are you doing? He demanded. Ichigo, you are a true wizard, Shinji stated from next to him as he began walking to stand in front of the line, looking Ichigo directly in the eyes. You've reached both Bankai and Resurrection and found a balance between each, becoming something more than Shinigami and Hollow. You avenged us all when you killed Aizen when we failed to do so. You are stronger than us all, Kurosaki Ichigo. Now, we implore you. Shinji suddenly bowed as well, at about a 40-degree angle to the rest of his body. Teach us Resurrection. They want the power of Resurrection? Cazador asked darkly. They buried their hollows deep within their souls, Ichigo. Make them regret it. Ichigo got the impression that Cazador felt some form of sympathy for the inner hollows of the rest of the wizard. After all, the same fate almost befell him as well. They will never achieve the pinnacle of hollow powers until they have reached the same truth and acceptance that you learned, Ichigo, Zangetsu contributed. Ichigo's customary scowl grew. You want to learn Resurrection? Fine. What? Love asked, dumbfounded. Just like that? You don't even want to know what we'll use it for? Rose added. I don't care what you want it for, Ichigo answered. Learning Resurrection is going to be one of the most painful and humbling experiences of your life. It will be hard, and you will definitely not come out the same way as you started. Everything you know about yourself will be challenged, and you will not be able to achieve Resurrection until you have accepted the truth of who and what you are. For you all, it will be doubly more difficult than it was for me, because you all sealed your hollows away for a century, Ichigo rebuked. If you still want me to teach you, then prepare for hell and open your mind and your very soul. He called on his hollow power then, materializing his mask without emotion as he glared at his would-be students. Because in order for you to reach Resurrection, you must resurrect your hollows. Kairaku Shunsui sat by Yamamoto's bed, where he had yet to awaken. His sensei looked so very old right now, despite his well-maintained muscular body. As Unohana had said the night before, Yamamoto was physically fine now, and just needed time to regain his Ryatsu. He'd completely exhausted himself with his Anetsu Jigaku, and then surviving a hand-sized puncture wound to his lung long enough to be treated. Yamaji. Kairaku murmured. You leave pretty large shoes to fill, you know. Being acting Sotecho is a lot of work. I'm just glad Sasakai Fukutecho can handle the duties of the first division pretty well by himself. You trained him well. There was silence for another minute, before Kairaku sighed. I wish I knew what to do about the Kurosaki kid. Ichigo-kun's gotten so very strong, sensei. Some might say too strong. Unfortunately, those same people are the ones who run our government. I know that you wanted him to identify with the Godai 13 and eventually join us, but I can't shake the feeling that it's now or never. I tried last night to make Ichigo a part-time Taicho of Aizen's old division, but we didn't have enough Taicho to get the motion through. We would have, if Unohana-senpai hadn't made a few good points about Hinamori-chan. Kairaku sighed again, his voice laden with sorrow. I don't know what I'm going to do about her either. She's a Fukutecho, and quite skilled at Kido, so it is not as though she isn't strong enough to do some damage if she wanted to. The question is whether Unohana-senpai can get through to her and help her through this. If she can't, then we have no choice but to lock her up in the maggot's nest. But she is just as much a victim in this as Ichigo is, both of them victims of Aizen, just in different ways. It feels wrong to think about punishing her for something that isn't really her fault, but I'll do it if I have to, for Soul Society's good. I just want to give her a chance. But it isn't right, either, that her chance comes at the expense of Ichigo's safety from the central. They meet up again soon, you know, he absently reminded his comatose teacher. And then Tozen and Jin will be tried for their crimes, but there's another set of problems there. Jin claims to have joined Aizen for the express purpose of betraying and killing him at the first opportunity, because of something he did to Toshiro's Fukutecho, Matsumoto-chan. Jin served faithfully, growing stronger and waiting for his chance. He found the weakness of Kyoka Suigetsu, and struck Aizen down with his Bankai's special ability. It would have worked, had Aizen not been as evolved as he had been. I don't want him to go to trial with the Central 46, because he seems to have been on Soul Society's side the entire time, and to be honest, Jin did what he felt he had to do because we wouldn't have believed him about Aizen. I can't begrudge him that. But Central 46 will protest if we don't punish him enough, so I need to come up with something suitable there. Tozen, on the other hand, joined Aizen to get vengeance on Soul Society for not punishing the Shinigami responsible for the death of his friend. From before he even joined the Godai he even went against our laws and acquired forbidden hollow powers. But Kamimura Taicho and Hiseigai Fukutecho have asked for leniency on Tozen's behalf. Kairaku shook his head. What's so frustrating about this is that I can sympathize with Tozen. Where he was denied justice, he sought to bring it out himself. Isn't that what I did with Jushiro when Rukia-chan was to be executed? Why can't you just wake up, Yamaji? Kairaku asked half-heartedly, not really expecting any response. It's so difficult to uphold the law when I know it will punish people who saw its deficiencies and tried to do what was right. How have you managed for so many centuries? How can you balance the need to maintain law and order, and the need to satisfy your own sense of right and wrong? As expected, Yamamoto's unconscious form gave no answer. The 8th Division Taicho shook his head, his eyes downcast. I'll just have to do the best I can. Get better soon, Yamaji, we need you. He swept from the room quietly, donning his straw hat to hide his eyes on his way out. Yamamoto's eyes opened then, and he heaved a sigh of his own. He'd been awake the entire time. I know it is painful, Shunsui, but you are my successor. My time is very nearly over, my student. You must find your own balance. Perhaps you will be more successful than I, and find a balance that causes you less pain. Make a soul society that you can be proud of. Was it really necessary for you to deceive him, Soteicho? Unohana asked quietly, entering the room. She'd known as well that Yamamoto had been faking sleep. After all, she was the best at medical Kido, and there were several identifying differences between faking it and truly sleeping. Yes, the leader of the Shinigami intoned, just as quietly. I am so very old, Unohana Taicho. My Ryatsu grows weaker with each passing year. I have perhaps another century left before I am no longer the strongest, and that is when the rumors will begin in earnest. He has gone senile, they will say. He is too old-fashioned, he cannot adapt to the new world, he can no longer protect Soul Society. They will call for my retirement, and the Godai 13's reputation will plummet until I do. So I must have my successor ready before then. Shunsui must be ready to take the reins of the Godai, he must be prepared. As you wish. I shall leave you to your rest, then. Yamamoto closed his eyes once more. Let us see how Shunsui does without my guidance. This old man still has some lessons to teach. Unohana silently moved into the next room, where Hinamori was currently recovering. She smiled pleasantly when she noticed that her patient was awake and sitting up. Ah, welcome back. How are you feeling, Hinamori Fukuteicho? I feel fine. When can I leave? Hinamori's tone was quiet, but there was a hint of underlying anger that Unohana easily detected. I'm glad you feel better, but just to be safe I would prefer you stay here for the next day or two, just in case. Just in case of what? Hinamori challenged. You fought a Quincy and a human with strange powers that we know little about, Unohana reminded her easily, her tone taking on just a hint of an edge, despite her still pleasant smile. So I would prefer you stay. Hinamori quailed under the smile and lay down again. Yes, ma'am. I'm so glad you see things my way, the healing Taicho replied, her smile never wavering as she began a general medical Kido on the young woman. Besides, your wounds have not yet fully healed, I could not spare the power, when Yamamoto Soteicho had a hole in his chest. Oh, Hinamori said softly. Did Aizen Taicho do that? Yes, Unohana confirmed with mixed feelings. Though inwardly glad that Hinamori had brought up the topic herself, the Taicho was concerned about the Taicho that the Fukuteicho had added to Aizen's name. I'm sure Aizen Taicho had a good reason for it, though. That depends on how you define a good reason, I suspect, the healer demurred. The Soteicho and Aizen-san were fighting. Aizen Taicho just wanted to fix things, Hinamori tried to explain. Soul Society needs to change, and the Central 46 is responsible for most of the mistakes, but the Spirit King put them in power, so Aizen Taicho wanted to replace him to fix it. Unohana sat down in a chair she normally reserved for visitors, but she had the feeling that this meeting would take a while. Please, take a deep breath and start from the beginning. I understand Aizen-san spoke to you. Hinamori did as she was bid, she'd always liked Unohana, so surely she'd see the truth. Several minutes later, the Fukuteicho had largely repeated the speech that Aizen had given her. So, to summarize, Unohana began, Aizen-san saw several flaws in Soul Society's justice system and decided to fix it by replacing the Spirit King. Knowing he had to have the Oken, he was going to try to be the next Soteicho, but saw that Kairaka Taicho would be the next one due to his age and power and favored position. Everything he's done after that was for the sole purpose of fixing Soul Society. Exactly. Hinamori exclaimed. Finally, someone who believes me. You have to admit, though, that he did. Hurt a lot of people, Unohana commented. Didn't you tell me that he sacrificed hundreds of people to the Hogyoku to try to make himself stronger? The girl looked down. Yes, she whispered. Her head shot up. But those hundreds are nothing to the millions that he will save by replacing the Spirit King. Hinamori-chan. Unohana said somberly. Aizen-san is dead. What? Hinamori gasped. No. Yes, the healer continued. Kurosaki Ichigo killed him. The Fukatecho began to quiver. The emotion behind it, however, Unohana had trouble deciphering. Is it rage? Or fear? Or sorrow? Or some combination? The first thing out of Hinamori's mouth, however, was not, why, or how could he, as the Taicho had expected. It was instead, does Aizen Taicho's body, have the head still attached? Strange question. But, I don't see the harm in answering it honestly. Besides, she needs to trust me. No, Unohana denied. Hinamori began to shake a little more violently, and this time Unohana could identify the emotion behind it. Intense fear. Hinamori-chan, what's wrong? Does Kurosaki know I'm still alive? Came fear-ridden voice. Most likely, but what does that matter? Unohana was now terribly confused. There was obviously something more than Hinamori wasn't telling her. Hinamori, however, was in the middle of a terrifying flashback. Flashback. Don't hurt Aizen Taicho. Hinamori cried, tears running down her face. Didn't you hear him? He's a good person, he's doing this all to help us. I don't care. I am going to kill him, slowly and painfully, the masked monster that Kurosaki Ichigo had become uttered, his hollow Ryatsu emanating sinisterly. And when he is dead, I am going to hang his head in my home, fake your death, and you day after day in front of it. Maybe I'll even let my friends here take turns with you. Hinamori paled in fear of the threat, but she knew that Aizen Taicho would never lose to someone like this. You cannot defeat Aizen Taicho, you monster. Abomination. End flashback. Hinamori began hyperventilating as panic ran through her system. Kurosaki was coming to make good on his promise. Hide me, she begged Unohana Taicho. Please. Kurosaki's coming for me. Soifun was a very, very frustrated woman. Soul Society had been this close to offering Kurosaki the position of Taicho, only to be stopped by a healer's bleeding heart. She'd honestly expected better of Unohana Taicho, who had seemed so level-headed and pragmatic. Fine then. If Hinamori Fukatecho is the problem, then I'll quietly remove the problem. Suicide shouldn't be too hard to believe, considering Hinamori's obsession with Aizen. She's too much of a risk anyway. Once that's done, Unohana should have no objections. I simply have to wait for Hinamori to leave Unohana's constant watch, and then have my Onamitsukido take care of it. That decision made, Soifun turned her thoughts to Kurosaki himself. But, what concessions could we make to appease his sense of having been wronged? To assuage his worries? He must be made loyal to Soul Society, but how? And that's the end of that chapter. Wow, things got dark there at the end. Ichigo is searching for something relaxing. I already know where he'll end up because I'm the author, but I'm not telling just yet. Unohana's the acting psychiatrist, because to be honest, I figure she has to be in order to deal with everyone else's general psychosis. I mean, think about it. I may not be a politician, but the biggest problem I can imagine a leader of a large supernatural military organization having, is maintaining law and order while managing a sense of morality. It's easy to have one or the other in their extremes. You can see them in other members of Soul Society, for crying out loud. Byakuya and Soifun, for instance, are on the extreme end of law and order, while Yukitake and Kairaku are of the do what you know is right variety. But how do you do both? Sometimes I think they can feel mutually exclusive. Chapter 34, Consequences. There was silence between Ichigo and the wizards for a few seconds. Every one of the exiled Shinigami Hollow hybrids knew that Ichigo was being perfectly serious, as he'd gone as far as drawing his mask. Well? Ichigo demanded. Are you willing to risk your life and sanity to reach the pinnacle of hollow power? I am. All eyes turned to Hiyori, who spoke quietly, but fervently as she stepped forward. I don't care if it's hard and painful. I don't care if I learn things about myself that I don't like. We need Resurrection to keep ourselves safe from Soul Society. But I don't just need it, I want it. I learned a hard lesson fighting Aizen, I wasn't strong enough. So teach me, DMN it. I want to be the strongest. If I need to bring back my hollow, then so be it. Well said, Zangetsu murmured. She might be closer than she thinks. She sounded positively hollow herself there. Ichigo nodded, acknowledging Hiyori's speech. Alright then, Hiyori. Now, keep in mind that I got my powers in a different way than you did. He took off the mask, twisting it around, looking into its visage for a few moments before crushing it. You had yours implanted into you by Aizen while already having been purely Shinigami. So was Tozen's, most likely. Mine, however, are all natural. My hollow powers were already developing before I became a Shinigami, and I never got a Konso, so I was never purified. So while I expect the process to be the same, there may be a couple of unexpected hitches. Everyone nodded, acknowledging Ichigo's words. Encouraged, he continued. Now that I have a chance to look back at everything, I realize that my first step was taken without my own knowledge of what it meant. I took my hollow sword and successfully claimed it as my own as I defeated him, he explained, materializing his hollow Zangetsu in his left hand. Ichigo stabbed it into the ground, allowing it to stand alone, cloth wrappings fluttering lightly in the air. That was more accident than anything else, he admitted. But it was my first step. I won't say any more until you've managed the same, and can summon them in the real world. Ichigo turned and walked to the door. Wait, that's all you're going to tell us? Shinji asked incredulously. The substitute Shinigami paused right outside the door, the hollow Zangetsu crumbling into erasure behind him. Resurrection is a road of self-discovery, Shinji. It wouldn't be fair to you if I gave you all the answers. But here's a hint, think like a hollow. With that, he silently left. The wizard all glanced at each other. Well, he gave his assignment, Rose muttered. And I think he meant it when he said he wouldn't say anything else until we did it. It's not like we'll be done in the next few minutes, Mashiro pointed out with an uncharacteristic pout on her face. We have to fight our hollows again. And we have to not only win, but take their swords and claim them, Kensei added grimly. No easy task. Lisa sighed. Right then. We'll come up with a schedule after dinner. What if one of us loses? Love asked quietly. The room fell silent as the spiky afro-haired wizard voiced what they'd all been thinking. It was a hard question. The last time they'd fought their hollows, they'd agreed that if one of them fell victim to their hollow, the rest would put him or her down. But now, they'd met Cazador de la Luna, and Ichigo had actually regained control of his body. Why not do what Ichigo did? Rose finally asked. Cut a deal with our hollows. Fight periodically for control. It worked well for him. True, Lisa agreed before glancing at their leader. What's wrong, Shinji? I just have a strange question, the blonde wizard said slowly with a strange expression. We didn't make any deals with our hollows when we fought them the first time. We just beat them into SBMSN, and buried them deep in our souls. How the hell do we unbury them? Hinamori-chan. Unohana blinked, confused by her patient's strange behavior. What do you mean? Please, Unohana Taicho. Hinamori begged. I might not have much time left. Relax, Hinamori-chan, the healer gently suggested. We will know if Kurosaki-san attempts to invade Soul Society, so you have plenty of time. Now, why not tell me what happened? Reassured by Unohana's words, the Fukutecho settled slightly. I had arrived in the living world to help out and find out the truth from Aizen Taicho himself. I was so confused. I mean, I was his Fukutecho was so long. Surely not all of it was a lie, surely he would tell me the truth. Hinamori knew how foolish she sounded, but it was how she had felt. Unohana, however, said nothing to condemn her. And that's when Aizen-san told you what you've told me? Hinamori nodded, glad that she was not being judged. Right. But Kurosaki. She shivered, as though the mere mention of his name was a curse on her spirit. He attacked Aizen Taicho anyway. And then, what he said. Unohana waited several seconds for Hinamori to stop shivering in a mixture of fear and revulsion. What did he say? The centuries-old Taicho asked quietly. He said he would kill Aizen Taicho, and take his head as a trophy. And then he would fake my death, Hinamori was unable to say it, but Unohana understood, and slowly moved to take her into an embrace. Apparently that simple gesture of reassurance was too much, as Hinamori promptly burst into sobs. The Fukutecho's tears stained Unohana's uniform, but neither moved for several minutes, until Hinamori had gotten a hold of herself. Finally, they broke the hug and Hinamori quieted her sniffles. I do not know Kurosaki-san very well personally, Unohana admitted, so I do not know whether he would do such a thing had he the capabilities. But does he have the capabilities, Hinamori-chan? That was an excellent question, and it pierced straight through the fog of lingering terror and panic in Hinamori's brain. I don't know, she said aloud. I never met him before then, and I was never briefed on his abilities since I woke up so recently. No one thought I would need them, since I was ordered to stay out of the fight. Then allow me to fill in the blanks. Unohana gave her patient a gentle smile, rather than one of her intimidating ones. She knew that she had to play this carefully. Despite her words, she was rather certain that Kurosaki Ichigo would not do what Hinamori-chan had related to her. If he had been that kind of person, then there would have been some sign prior to then, especially during his invasion of Soul Society. The fact that Kuchiki Rukia had been powerless and had stayed with Ichigo for months, and still enjoyed his company, stated quite a lot as well. Also, Unohana had taken the girl personally from Kurosaki-san's friends, who had explained their side of the story. Aizen had used Kyoka Suigetsu on his former subordinate and made her think that Ichigo had said that very thing. That, to the highly experienced Taicho, gave them a lot of credit. In addition, it matched Aizen's character to do such a thing. But Hinamori-chan would not believe this. It was all too apparent her fear ran very, very deeply, and to her the experience was very real. She had trusted the former Taicho, Aizen, and would automatically dismiss any suggestions that he had used Kyoka Suigetsu on her as well. What Unohana had to do was always make it very apparent that she was on Hinamori-chan's side, and slowly have the Fukutecho discover the truth on her own. The first step to that was reducing the fear, by giving Hinamori-chan all the information. Kurosaki-san's powers are well documented, Unohana began. His Zanpakuto's name is Zangetsu, and its power is the condensing of Kurosaki-san's powers and magnifying the power of his slash. It's known as the Getsuga Tensho. His Bankai is Tensa Zangetsu. In this form, Kurosaki-san's Getsuga is much more powerful, and his speed and strength receive dramatic increases as well. In addition, he has a hollow mask that allows him to tap into hollow powers and enhance his Shinigami ones further. The most recent report states that he can use Resurrection, which seems to give him an upgrade in all the powers I've mentioned so far. In terms of Kido, he seems to have had little education. He used Bakudo 1, Sai on Aizen during the fight in the fake Karakura, but that is all we know of. He appears to prefer fighting melee. Unohana put a hand on Hinamori's arm. Hinamori-chan, Kurosaki-san simply doesn't have the ability to fake your death. Hinamori still looked a little worried, though far less than a few minutes prior. What if he tries to take me by force? Then Soul Society will go to war again, this time with him, Unohana reassured her. You can't think that we would simply let him do as he wishes. If it comes down to it, then I will fight him myself. Nothing is going to happen to you. Now get some rest. I promise you, if Kurosaki comes, I will protect you with my life. Hinamori's eyes shone with gratitude and unshed tears. Thank you, Unohana Taicho, she whispered. She lay down, suddenly feeling her exhaustion. She was very tired from her burst of panic. She fell asleep almost immediately. As soon as she detected her patient was asleep, Unohana let loose a sigh, her normal smile vanishing. Poor girl, she murmured. It will take months to make her comfortable enough to walk outside alone. Maybe years. And even then, just meeting Kurosaki-san could cause a relapse. I don't think her fear of him will ever truly vanish. DMNU, Aizen. She left the room, only to almost stumble over Hitsugaya Toshiro. Hitsugaya Taicho, she exclaimed lightly. I assume you're here to see Hinamori-chan. Yes. Is she awake? Unohana gave her colleague a sympathetic look. I'm sorry, she just fell asleep again. Hitsugaya's expression hardly changed, but Unohana could tell that he was disappointed. How? How is she? Quickly but gently, Unohana guided him into another room so as to not be overheard. Quite frankly, Hitsugaya Taicho, not good. Physically she is almost completely recovered, but mentally, she is worse off than before. Hitsugaya nodded. I had hoped otherwise, but I suppose that's to be expected. I read the reports after the meeting. Aizen used an illusion on her to convince her that Aizen was good and Ichigo was the real enemy. You are well informed, Unohana commented, slightly impressed but not surprised by the young Taicho's dedication. I'm afraid that the illusion has had devastating consequences. Hinamori-chan is truly afraid of Kurosaki Ichigo and believes him a monster due to the illusion. She is convinced that he is coming after her now that her protector, Aizen, is dead. Hitsugaya closed his eyes and rubbed his temples with his right hand. Of course. I should have expected as much. What can be done? I am working with her personally, the healer assured the ice user. Together, we should be able to solve the majority of her issues given enough time, but she will likely be very wary to outright afraid of anything that could be linked to Kurosaki-san for a long time. In the meantime, she will need the help of her close friends, but I must ask you to not bring up Aizen or Kurosaki-san if at all possible. What if she brings up the subject and insists on continuing it? Hitsugaya queried, concerned. Be supportive, and discuss it. Try to remain as calm as possible, Unohana advised. She may or may not lose her temper with you, but do not take it personally. Matters of misplaced faith are never easy to fix, and she will almost certainly apologize to you after it's all over. She paused. Hitsugaya Taicho, what she truly needs from you is to know that despite everything, her friends and family are still there for her. Hitsugaya nodded, reassured from her words. All right. When she wakes, could you please tell her that I came to visit? Of course. Thank you. With that, Hitsugaya made his way out. Now then, it was time for Unohana's next two patients. She calmly walked to the next room and entered softly. Good evening, Tozen-san, Jin-san, Kamamura Taicho. Good evening, Unohana Taicho, Kamamura greeted respectfully, standing up from where he'd been seated near Tozen. He and Hisagi had taken turns standing watch over the 2X Taicho, largely because Tozen was considered the larger flight risk. Jin was sitting up, and merely nodded at Unohana, his small satisfied smile never once dimming. He had been rather docile his entire incarceration, actually, hardly saying a word, but smiling all the same. When asked by Hisagi several hours ago, he had simply said, Aizen's finally dead. My dream, hundreds of years in the making, is finally accomplished. I even got the chance to stab him in the chest. I don't need any more reason than that. Tozen looked in her general direction. Hello, Unohana Taicho. Would you care for a game of shogi? No thank you. Unohana approached the blind man first, quietly using a diagnostic healing Kido. You seem to be completely fine, physically, and far faster than I had expected. It is due to my new hollow powers, Tozen explained without a trace of regret. They increase my regenerative abilities, even without my actively calling on them. Unohana nodded and moved on to Jin, using the same diagnostic. You are recovering nicely, Jin-san. I see you have been doing as I asked and not been using any Ryuryoku. It will still be some time before you can even use Shirkai again safely, however. It was worth it to put that hole in Aizen's chest. Unohana said nothing, but privately agreed. She would have done the same simply for what he'd done to Hinamori-chan. Somehow, however, she got the impression that Jin knew her feelings on the matter by the way his smile widened minutely for a second. Her diagnostic complete, Unohana stepped away calmly, but paused near the door. She wanted to know something, just in case. I'm not sure if Kamimura Taicho has told you, but we took a vote last night on whether to promote Kurosaki Ichigo to Taicho of the 5th Division. Neither trader looked particularly surprised. And? Jin asked. I vetoed it, which meant that we were one Taicho short. Hinamori-chan, right? Jin asked pointedly, his eyes opening just slightly. And since there's a decent chance that one or both of us will be restored to our previous positions, you'll want to know whether we'll also recommend him. Unohana's eyes widened fractionally. He's very perceptive. Yes. I don't know, Jin wondered aloud, leaning against the wall and looking up at the ceiling in an almost quizzical manner. He's gotten unbelievably strong. Did you know that he can already look into and accurately decipher the feelings that echo in a Shinigami's Zanpakuto? That is a high-level skill, Kamimura answered, impressed. His growth rate is downright frightening, isn't it? Jin's smile dimmed somewhat as he gave some honest thought to the question. Ichigo's got the right kind of mentality for being a Taicho, I think, Jin continued. And with a little practice, I don't think paperwork'd be a problem. Certainly couldn't do worse than Kenpachi, anyway. There was more than a grain of truth to that, Unohana had to admit. Kenpachi was notorious for putting off work in favor of fun, and his childlike Fukutecho was just the same. His paperwork ended up being largely handled by his 3rd and 5th seats, Madarame Mikiku and Ayasegawa Yumachika. But you know, I feel for Hinamori-chan, Jin admitted, looking back at the lead healer. Wasn't her fault what Aizen did to her. He stole something precious from her, ruined countless happy memories. She needs your help, and if you think making Ichigo her Taicho keeps her from getting better, then nah, I won't do it. Thank you, Unohana said sincerely, looking him in the eyes. Jin had just won a measure of respect back from her. She hadn't expected him to be so sympathetic. It was as though he knew someone who had suffered something similar before. She put it out of her mind, and instead turned to Tozen. What of you? My only experience with the boy was when he was fighting Grimmjow, Tozen replied. But he left a favorable impression. Not to mention, can Soul Society truly afford to not have him on their side? I follow the path of least bloodshed. I lost my way and followed a false trail set by Aizen, but now I see clearly. Having Kurosaki Ichigo not on Soul Society's side can only end in war, with many casualties and much suffering. I sympathize with Hinamori's plight, Unohana Taicho, but should I regain my former position, I will support Kurosaki's ascendancy to Taicho. Hinamori is now a danger to every other Shinigami in Soul Society due to her unwavering belief in Aizen, and she will not be able to tolerate those around her celebrating his demise. She can be taken care of in the maggot's nest. It was perhaps the first time that Unohana and Tozen had ever disagreed on such a matter. Their views had been similar for as long as Unohana had known the blind Shinigami, both harboring a distaste for unnecessary bloodshed. Tozen had very nearly joined her division, but had instead been snapped up by the Taicho-turned-wizard Muguruma Kensei. Harsh, Jin commented. You would throw her into the maggot's nest. She'd never be able to defend herself with just her physical strength. To my sight, either Kurosaki or Hinamori must go in order to maintain the peace, Tozen argued. They cannot coexist without Hinamori losing her mind. The illusion Aizen put her under saw to that. How do you know about that? Unohana demanded calmly. Tozen, by all accounts, had been apprehended long before that, and should have had no opportunity to learn it. I have exceptional hearing, being blind. Tozen turned his sightless eyes on the healer, who looked into them unflinchingly. After a few seconds, it was apparent that was all that Tozen would say. I see, Unohana murmured. She had her answer, now it was simply a question of what to do with the information. Please excuse me. I have other patients to attend to. She left a moment later, not giving them any chance to interrupt as she thought quickly of what needed to be done. Kuchiki Taicho. Byakuya looked up from his paperwork to see his Fukatecho standing at attention, holding a few documents of his own. Abarai. I've been invited by Kurosaki Ichigo to participate in a free vacation in the living world. I formally request a week's leave, starting this Monday, Renji intoned. Granted, Byakuya answered immediately, returning his attention to the paperwork on his desk. Renji blinked. He'd been expecting something more along the lines of his being a needed presence in Soul Society's tumultuous time of reorganization, and perhaps a veiled comment that he should be training to fill one of the possible slots for Taicho. After all, Renji was, to the best of anyone's knowledge, the only non-Taicho Shinigami in the Gotei 13 who had achieved Bankai and might be interested in leaving the division he was in. Knowing his Taicho, the Fukatecho had even taken the time to prepare calm responses to any question he could imagine Byakuya asking him. So Byakuya's easy acceptance of Renji's request for leave rather startled him. Taicho? He asked in confusion before his brain could halt his tongue. The Taicho of the 6th Division calmly put down his writing utensils and looked his Fukatecho in the eye. Abarai, you have served the Gotei 13, and this division, faithfully as my Fukatecho. You have proven you are among the elite by achieving Bankai. You have grown strong, Abarai, strong enough to have struck a blow on Aizen that would have finished almost anyone else, and wise enough to know there are still depths of your potential yet untapped. I would not insult someone of your dedication by reminding you of your need to train, for you are already well aware. You received that invitation this morning, and you have clearly carefully weighed your options before choosing your path. So long as you understand the consequences to your decision, and I have not received orders otherwise, I will not stop you. Byakuya turned his eyes back down to the paperwork before him. When you return, your work will be waiting for you. Hi, Taicho. Renji saluted, then began to quickly retreat from his superior's office, a sense of pride filling him. He'd just been verbally acknowledged by the man he aspired to defeat. He was another step closer to finally achieving his dream. Abarai. Renji froze. Hi, Taicho. Byakuya's eyes didn't leave the paperwork this time. As he signed another paper, he finally said, if you see Rukia, inform her she too has my permission to go. Agreeing quickly, Renji almost ran from the office to tell his lifelong friend. Finding her in the 13th Division training grounds, the Fukatecho narrowly avoided becoming a pineapple-haired icicle by dodging one of Rukia's dances. Rukia, he greeted. Rukia lowered her sword. Renji. What are you doing here? I thought you'd be drowning in paperwork by now. So did I, but get a load of this. Renji almost pushed the invitation in her face. Rukia grabbed it and quickly read through it. Her eyes lit up in excitement before her face turned downcast. I'll have to ask Nisama. He already gave permission, the tattooed redhead interrupted. I didn't ask for you, he amended, seeing her thunderous expression. He just knew, and told me to tell you. After a few moments deciding Renji's fate, Rukia finally smiled. All right then. This Monday it is. Ichigo was not a man who scared easy. He lived for a good fight, just like his Taicho, Zaraki Kenpachi, and was unafraid of death. However, he had a very strong survival instinct, and his whole body was screaming not to do what he was about to do. He knocked on the door in front of him. Come on in," Zaraki beckoned grumpily. Ichigo entered. For once, Zaraki was working on his paperwork. Ichigo appeared to be snoozing in the corner. That explains why he's grumpy. He hates paperwork. "Ichigo. What do you want?" "Taicho." Ichigo swallowed, but carried on with his voice unwavering. "I want your help in training my Bankai." Now Zaraki looked interested. "I thought you might have Bankai but I wasn't sure. And you want my help?" "Yes, Taicho. I want to fight you with it." Zaraki grinned widely, his immense Ryatsu beginning to give off battlelust as he eagerly stepped away from the table and drew his sword. "I was just hoping for a good distraction right about now." "Lucky me." Ichigo raised his own Ryatsu in challenge and drew Hozukimaru. "Well then, it's time for our rematch. Bankai." Ryuman Hozukimaru. Outside training on his own, Yumachika sighed when he heard that yell. He turned around just in time to witness part of their barracks collapse. "I'll go alert the 4th Division." Part of the debris suddenly blasted outwards, revealing Ichigo in his oversized Bankai, swinging the Chinese monk's spade joyfully at Zaraki, who blocked with his own Zanpakuto. "You got a nice-looking Bankai there, Ichigo," the Taicho complimented, his grin looking more and more unnerving by the second. "But I wonder, how strong is it?" He purposely didn't block the next strike from the Guandao in Ichigo's other hand, which cut deeply into Zaraki's left shoulder. "Perfect. You can cut me pretty well with that. You better not take too many more hits like that, Taicho." Ichigo taunted, indicating the faded red dragon crest on the axe blade that floated behind him. Even as he spoke, the crest filled partway. "I get more powerful with every drop of blood spilled." Zaraki's left arm suddenly came up and knocked the weapon out of his shoulder, and he rushed directly at Ichigo, bells in his hair ringing madly. Ichigo deflected the as-yet nameless Zanpakuto with the weapon in his right hand and struck again with his left, this time landing a shallow cut to Zaraki's torso. But he was forced to jump backwards to avoid being cut in half from the power of Zaraki's next slice, and even then the Taicho's immense Ryatsu seemed to surge forth, knocking him backwards. Ichigo grinned as well as he gave it his all fighting his Taicho. He should have done this long ago. It felt good to be using his full power, and unafraid of being caught. With a battle cry of his own, he leapt back into fight, twin expressions of battle-given joy on both fighters' faces. Ichigo sat on the roof of his home, watching the sunset, quietly enjoying how the sky's hue slowly darkened and shifted into other colors, creating a veritable painting of nature's beauty. But Ichigo's enjoyment was tarnished by his body feeling tense and on edge. He longed to be doing something physically demanding that would allow him to relax his mind. He knew that he would enjoy the sunset far more if he were not so on edge. It was too soon, Ichigo realized, for him to be able to properly appreciate the sunset like he had before. Ichigo sighed, getting up and dusting off his pants before walking to the edge and casually flipping himself down and through his open window. He'd finished his homework earlier, and he was rather tired. After all, he hadn't gotten much sleep the night before. "I think I'll take an early night, then." Several minutes later, Ichigo had changed into his nightclothes and lay down to rest, his Shinigami representative badge underneath his pillow, just in case. He was just about to fall asleep when his badge suddenly screamed shrilly right into his ear, "Hollow." Taken by surprise, with his ear ringing painfully, Ichigo almost fell out of bed as he shot up. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," he groaned, picking up the badge and half-heartedly slapping it against his chest, releasing his Shinigami form. Stepping through his window, Ichigo sensed the hollow a fair distance away, and shunpaed to it in an instant. This hollow was a rather simple humanoid one, all black body with a white mask like most of its kind, with small bone-like blades extending from its elbows, knees and shoulders. It was about 3 times Ichigo's size, but it was far weaker than Ichigo's usual intruders. "You're interrupting my sleep, a-hole," he said calmly. Go back to Hueco Mundo or I'll kill you where you stand. Who are you? Kurosaki Ichigo. I'll give you 15 seconds to get out of my town before I take you out. Hold on, the hollow cried out, waving its arms, I'm just a messenger. Ichigo buried his face in his left hand in exasperation. Fine, fine. What's the message? Ulquiorra Schiffer wants you to meet him in Hueco Mundo, near Las Noches. He told me to tell you that it's extremely important. Ichigo nodded curtly. Open the Garganta. I'll follow you there. Gladly. There are too many Shinigami here for my taste. The hollow opened a Garganta and leapt into it quickly, Ichigo following a beat later. A short time later, Ichigo and the hollow reappeared in Hueco Mundo, landing softly on the sands of the endless desert. Alright then, I'm out of here. The hollow whose name Ichigo had neglected to acquire ran off, not wanting to be anywhere near someone with Ichigo's levels of power. Kurosaki Ichigo. Ichigo turned, having expected this. Ulquiorra, he greeted. What's up? I believe congratulations are in order. You defeated Aizen, Ulquiorra began. However, unexpected problems have arisen. What do you mean? Aizen was the leader of Las Noches, and was master of even Vasto Lord-level Arrancar, Ulquiorra stated. Prior to his rule, Barragan Luzenbarn was the established king of Hueco Mundo. Now, both are dead. Hueco Mundo is in an uproar, attempting to determine who shall be its new leader. Hold on, how do they know Aizen's dead? I only just killed him yesterday, Ichigo pointed out. Kurosaki Ichigo, your clash could be felt across dimensions to those who knew to look. When your power remained in the end, the outcome was obvious. Oh. So, what's happening about the uproar thing? I am attempting to gather any living Espada, former or otherwise, to re-establish order. Sounds reasonable. Ulquiorra merely nodded in acknowledgement to Ichigo's remark. In terms of rank and power, Tia Haribel and I are the strongest Arrancar remaining of Aizen's army. However, we are not necessarily stronger than the other Vasto Lord Hollows in Hueco Mundo, and there are elements of Aizen's army that may hold grudges against us, or wish to fight to prove themselves stronger. Grimmjow, Ichigo recognized, remembering the Sexta Espada's desire to become Vasto Lord. Precisely. Many high-level hollows may attempt to band together and invade Karakura to locate and consume the one who has defeated Aizen, you, in order to become the new strongest. If I understand your motivations correctly, you find that idea abhorrent not simply because you do not desire to be consumed, but because others will be put in danger. DMN right, the wizard agreed. So you called me to warn me? That was one of my objectives, yes, Ulquiorra acknowledged. My second objective is to persuade you to end the rebellion yourself. And how would I do that? Ichigo asked with a raised eyebrow. Recall that hollows obey the strongest. It is a matter of instinct. Demonstrate your strength, and most will not dare disobey. At that point, you publicly put myself and my colleagues in power as the established rulers in your absence, thusly allowing yourself to return to your human life. So, to summarize, Hueco Mundo is in civil war because there's no established strongest, so your solution is to prove that I'm the strongest, and then put you in as a legal authority. Yes. Ichigo sighed. He already knew his answer, he would do all he could to make Karakura safe. But still. The spirit worlds are never going to let me relax, are they? Probably not. I would not anticipate it. You two are so supportive. Fine. How do we do this? Ulquiorra nodded. Flare your power as high as you can. Any challengers will flare their own to alert you their acceptance of the challenge, and then come to fight you. When you win, flare it again. Repeat the process until there are no challengers left. At that point, you will be acknowledged as King of Hueco Mundo. Let's get this party started, then. Yes, let's. Ichigo raised the arm holding Zangetsu and brought his left hand to rest on the inside of his right elbow. Bankai. Ryatsu swirled around Ichigo, a black Getsuga running down Zangetsu. When it cleared, Ichigo was in his new Bankai form, with the chain running up his bare right arm. Almost casually pulling on his Ajucha's mask and deciding to save Resurrection for if he really needed it, Ichigo turned his hollowified eyes to the starry night sky of Hueco Mundo. Time to get to work. He flared his Ryatsu, vaguely noting that Okuiora weathered it without even a flinch. A few moments later, he felt answering flares in the distance, which all began coming straight towards him. Ichigo steadied his grip on Tensa Zangetsu and put everything else but the incoming battles out of his mind. He couldn't afford to be distracted when he was fighting for his life. The first one arrived and Ichigo smirked behind his mask. Perfect. Who the hell are you? The hollow demanded. This one seemed to be human-shaped with thick bone-like things jutting out of his skin in just about every visible place, giving the hollow a resemblance to a pine cone. The hollow used his two arms to rip out two of the bones from his hip area, which revealed themselves to be spiked boomerangs, which he held as though they were daggers. The name's Kurosaki Ichigo, Vizard. I killed Aizen. You. Leru Banthas, Vasto Lord. Bohu, Cazador said appreciatively. Can I eat him, please? I want to find out what Vasto Lord is like. Normally, I'd say yes, but we don't have time to fight the same guy twice, not when we're gonna be fighting a lot of people after this. What about the last guy? He's bound to be a Vasto Lord too. Maybe. We'll see. It seems my inner hollow wants to eat you. I'm rather curious what Vizard tastes like, myself, Leru admitted. Now let's get started. And that's it for this chapter. A lot's going on all over the place this chapter. Anohana's getting all the information and now weighing her options. Byakuya is expressing some respect for Renji, and Renji and Rukia get their invitations to Ichigo's vacation. Ikaku, of course, is working on training his Bankai under Kenpachi, as he'd thought about doing. With any luck he'll get stronger. But poor Ichigo. The spirit realms never give him a break. Remember that before Aizen took charge, Baragan was king of Hueco Mundo per canon. Now both of them are dead, and Hueco Mundo is looking for a new strongest. That means that there would normally be lots of, I must get stronger, quickly, and thus a lot more hollow attacks on the real world looking for powerful souls. So, since Ichigo can't tolerate that, he's in Hueco Mundo to take care of the issue in a location where he can remove his limiters and unleash all of his considerable power without risking harming anyone. And when that's done, well, you'll see. Once again, a quick note regarding my wife's business. She asked me to advertise, so I'm being a good husband and doing what she asks. She's a Mary Kay beauty consultant, and is looking for people to A. Join her team, B. Partake in a free facial, regardless of where you are. Please send me a PM, mention it in a review, or send me an email if you're interested. Chapter 35, Preventative Measures. Ichigo dodged another spiked boomerang while Shunpai and G to the side, trying to get into the Vasto Lord's blind spot. Leru Banthas had proven to be a formidable warrior, and his style involved adding more and more weapons to the mix, making it impossible to approach without being injured. Currently, there were 10 boomerangs spiraling around the hollow at high speed, creating an offensive barrier that Ichigo was wary of physically tackling. The only opening at that time was when Leru was throwing another of his weapons, and the opening itself was dangerous, for Ichigo would have to then confront a head-on attack with little chance to evade. There were also 4 boomerangs chasing Ichigo constantly, somehow controlled psychically by Leru. Leru himself was not simply standing there either, he was going after Ichigo physically as well, wielding 2 of his boomerangs in his hands. Ichigo had already attempted a Zero to obliterate the barrier, only to have the rapidly revolving shield of thrown weapons deflect them. Somehow, the boomerangs had reflective properties. If I let him get up enough steam it'll be impossible to beat him. Now I see why he's a Vasto Lord. Time to use something new. Use what? Leru asked in an amused fashion. Ichigo leapt back again, putting a little distance between them, and then he began spinning Tensa Zangetsu to charge his signature attack. Getsuga. Ha! Another energy attack. You know my boomerangs will just deflect it. Leroux lunged at his opponent, eager to eat such a powerful foe. Suddenly, however, Leroux found himself stopped in his tracks, as Ichigo had simply leapt into and through the shield, taking the cuts and slices and ignoring them as he brought his blade down upon the Vastolord. Tensho. In an instant, the Vastolord was cut in half by the crescent-shaped black cutter. Being only the size of Ichigo himself, the Getsuga continued on for as far as Ichigo could see, cutting a swath through the desert sands of Hueco Mundo. The Getsuga also caught another of Ichigo's challengers off guard, obliterating him in an instant. Regenerating his wounds quickly, Ichigo turned a hard eye to the hollows around him. Not all of them had come to fight him, some had come simply to watch, and most of these were obviously Ajuchas, though there was the rare Vastolord among them as well, apparently not interested in becoming king of Hueco Mundo. Anyone else going to challenge me? Ichigo asked quietly. There was much shuffling around by the assembled challengers as they attempted to determine who had arrived next. Ichigo's display of power was enough to make them doubt their ability to win. While they were deciding, a familiar woman's voice called out, Ichigo. The wizard turned his head to see Neliel Tuo Delschrank and Tia Howlibel running towards him, followed slowly by two figures he didn't recognize. Ichigo took off his mask so he could conserve his power for the time being. Nell. Howlibel, and, who are they? This is the former Primera Espada, Coyote Stark, Neliel introduced, indicating the tall, bored-looking Arrancar. And this is Lilinet Gingerback, his fraction. Ichigo immediately looked at Stark suspiciously. I killed Aizen. Is that going to be a problem? Stark shook his head negatively. No. I owed Aizen much for giving me a priceless gift, but my debt has been paid. I fought for him as best I could. That was all that was ever asked of me. He gave a tiny smile in Neliel's direction. Now, I seek to convert Las Noches into a peaceful place in Hueco Mundo, a sanctuary of sorts, with Neliel. Ichigo nodded, he could respect that. All right. Stark looked around. You're trying to become king of Hueco Mundo? I don't exactly have a choice, Ichigo explained. Since the last two rulers of Hueco Mundo, Aizen and Barragan, are dead, Okiura told me that there was a good chance that hollows would invade my town looking to consume and absorb powerful souls to grow stronger quickly. I don't want my companions to die, so I'm here to take care of it now. Something in that last sentence seemed to hit Stark hard, almost enough to physically stumble. Little did Ichigo know that his explanation had sparked memories of loneliness and despair. I don't want my companions to die. I'm lonely. Why do they always die? Why can't I be weak? Stark tore himself out of his recollections and shook his head. It's a pain in the butt, but maybe I can help. He raised his voice so he could be heard. I am Coyote Stark, Aizen's Primera Espada and second in command, he called out. Aizen, former ruler of Hueco Mundo, is dead. This man is Kurosaki Ichigo, the one who killed him. So he said, another human-sized hollow agreed with a disbelieving and undeniably feminine tone, stepping forward in challenge. This hollow was completely covered from head to toe in a bone-like armor, but the armor was covered in strange designs that resembled strange, grotesque beasts with little markings where their heads would be. With a start, Ichigo realized that the markings looked like hollow masks. Are those supposed to be pictures of hollows, maybe? Maybe she's vain and likes to remind people of who all she's consumed. Cazador suggested. Who knows? But what evidence do we have that this boy was the one who slew him? The hollow finished. Ichigo's eyes narrowed as he stared into the hollow's eyes, anger beginning to rise within him. There's no evidence I can give that would suffice, would it? It wasn't a question. Not unless you have some trophy of the kill, like I do. She gestured towards her armor. My armor automatically updates with every hollow I eat. And the words of the Primera Espada, and the quarta espada, and the third espada both past and present aren't enough? Ichigo asked incredulously. You know what, fine. I'm tired, and it's been a long day. There's no point in dragging this out. He held his left hand in front of his face, thick black tendrils of hollow Ryatsu rising from each finger. I'll show you my power, and force you to submit. In a single ripping motion, he pulled the mask back onto his face, looked directly into the eyes of his opponent, and gathered his hollow Ryatsu. Black in the night, Cazador de la Luna. Ichigo's eyes never left the hollow in front of him as his mask stretched around his head and formed those wicked horns. His stance never changed as his hollow vest stretched out to envelop his body or as his chest opened up with a hollow hole. His killing intent never let up for an instant as his Ryatsu changed to match his new hollow form. Now do you get it? Ichigo demanded, unleashing his full Ryatsu upon them all, noticing with some satisfaction that most of the Ajuchas fell to their knees, unable to stand, and some of them were even unable to breathe. Almost all the rest of the crowd looked rather uncomfortable as well. I am Vizard. I am hollow and I am Shinigami, and I have attained both Bankai and Resurrection. Let me make this crystal clear, I am not in the mood to be f'd with right now, and I am never in the mood to put up with people endangering my town. If it means guarding of those I have sworn to protect, I will purify every DMN one of you, so unless you want to know the feeling of my Zanpakuto running through your heads, now would be a good time for you to shut up, acknowledge me as your king, and let me get back to my own life in the living world. If you want them to respond, you might want to lighten up on the Ryatsu a bit, Ichigo. Ichigo waited a few more seconds, just to make sure that they had gotten the point, before lowering his Ryatsu output. So, he inquired a lot more calmly, now that he'd gotten a chance to vent his anger in a productive way. What's it going to be? Despite half expecting it, Ichigo was still surprised to suddenly be the only one standing upright, everyone else had fallen into bowing or kneeling positions. Even the Arankar Ichigo had befriended had all fallen to one knee and bowed their heads. Hail, Kurosaki Ichigo, King of Hueco Mundo. Hitsugaya Toshiro sat at his desk in the 10th Division quietly, he'd just finished his paperwork, and miraculously Matsumoto had done hers with minimal complaint. It's probably her way of trying to make things easier for me, since Hinamori's. Hitsugaya shook his head, trying not to think about it. Aizen was dead. Getting angry about Hinamori's condition would serve no purpose any longer. Hitsugaya was broken from his thoughts by an unexpected knock on the door. Enter. To the white-haired Taicho's surprise, Anohana Taicho stepped inside quietly, as though she were about to ask something painful. I apologize for disturbing you at such a late hour, she began, taking her seat in front of Hitsugaya. It's nothing, the diminutive Taicho reassured. What can I do for you, Anohana Taicho? Is something wrong with Hinamori? No, Hinamori-chan is resting peacefully, Unohana hastened to inform Hitsugaya. But she may not be for long. Tell me, Hitsugaya Taicho, what do you believe are the chances that Tozen-san will recover his Taicho position? Hitsugaya frowned pensively, giving it some thought. Kamamura Taicho did ask for leniency in deciding Tozen's punishment, did he not? As Kayaraka Taicho is acting Soteicho, and given that we are distinctively lacking in Shinigami capable of filling a Taicho's roles at the moment, I believe chances are relatively high that Tozen will regain his position but in extremely limited fashion. Unohana nodded. I had come to the same conclusion. Tozen has told me today that should that be the case, he will recommend that Kurosaki Ichigo become Taicho of the 5th Division. I see. And you want me to retract my recommendation, then, for Hinamori's sake? No, the healing Taicho disagreed. That would only set back the problem for a short time. In order to give Hinamori-chan the most amount of time and the best chance to survive, you must convince Kurosaki-san not to accept the Taicho position when it is offered. You worked with him for some time, Hitsugaya Taicho, and the reports indicate that he seems to listen to those he has worked with. Could you not persuade him to ask for some extended length of time to consider? Hitsugaya frowned. I believe I could, should it come to that. How long do you anticipate needing to bring Hinamori to the point of being capable of working with Kurosaki? Healing the mind is far different from healing the body, Hitsugaya Taicho, Unohana stated quietly. She may heal quickly, or she may never heal. Given what happened last time, however. Both Taicho held a moment of silence as they recalled Hinamori's struggles when Aizen had betrayed her openly. For her faith to have been restored, and then have Aizen die at the hands of someone she'd been fooled into thinking a monster. The truth could very well elude Hinamori for the rest of her days. Kurosaki isn't necessarily the source of the time limit, Hitsugaya pointed out, a new thought coming to him once he'd made that realization. When Yamamoto Sotecho recovers, you know what he'll do. Unohana nodded sadly. He will see Kurosaki-san as a potential asset, and Hinamori-chan as a burden. He will make the sacrifice quickly should Kurosaki-san accept the position. I am hoping that he will take more time to consider the decision if Kurosaki-san remains where he is and takes no overt actions towards Soul Society. Hitsugaya looked at the healer in surprise. Sometimes it was hard to remember that Unohana was well versed in politics and gentle manipulations with her usual actions. He narrowed his eyes. Unohana had to know that relations were very strained between Kurosaki and the Godei. The odds of something sparking outright hostility were dangerously high. This is a dangerous gamble, he warned. I'm aware of that, but I will not let an innocent be sacrificed just because she has been mentally raped by Aizen, Unohana replied with a hint of steel in her sweet voice. I had thought that you agreed with me after our talk today, Hitsugaya Taicho. A shiver ran down Hitsugaya's spine at her tone. He was treading in perilous waters, but the icy Shinigami would not back down from what he knew was right. I do agree that Hinamori deserves her chance to recover, Unohana Taicho. What I am saying is that we should use that plan as a last resort. There must be other options available, we simply need to find them. Where does your authority supersede Yamamoto Sotecho's? Don't you have special rights as the lead healer? Hitsugaya questioned. I remember reading about something when I was preparing for my Taicho proficiency test. Yes, I have the right to declare a Shinigami medically unfit for duty, Unohana agreed. Unfortunately, it only has provisions for physical trauma. Mental trauma is typically handled by the Shinigami in question's Taicho. And as Aizen is the reason for Hinamori's state. Hitsugaya frowned. That's a hole in the law that should be rectified. Unfortunately, it is not likely to be addressed for some time. Soul Society has more pressing issues, Unohana informed her fellow Taicho matter-of-factly. As this is a rare event, it has a low priority. In any case, I have found no other option, which is why I came to you. I see. The Taicho in a child's body considered this for a few moments. I will have a talk with Kurosaki. Thank you. A sudden flare of Ryatsu from the 4th Division caught both of their attentions. Almost as soon as it had been released, it was silenced. Hinamori, they cried out in unison, leaping to their feet and flickering into Shuunpa. They arrived together, rushing through the doors to where they'd felt the Ryatsu, only to see Hisagi crumple to the floor, and Jin staggered against a wall and breathing heavily outside of Hinamori's door, holding his Zanpakuto at the ready, with blood dripping from the end. There was someone here. Who was it? Hitsugaya demanded as Unohana quickly began another diagnostic scan of Jin. I don't know. Jin wheezed. Whoever it was, didn't speak. Average height. No Zanpakuto. Completely covered, in dark clothes. Suppressed Ryatsu. It was your Ryatsu we felt. You used your Shirkai. Unohana exclaimed in a mixture of surprise and urgency as she got the results from her diagnostic Kido. Stay awake, Jin-san. You must stay awake. Sorry. Unohana Taicho. Didn't have a choice. And then Jin collapsed. Hitsugaya Taicho, chase the intruder. I must attend to Jin-san. And before the ice-wielding Taicho could respond, Unohana was rushing Jin off to be attended to. Hitsugaya looked around quickly before spotting some blood on the ground that ended at a point. He Shunpaed away once he felt us coming. He focused his own power and with a few moments' concentration, materialized Ryuraku. Searching quickly, he found the one whose signature matched that lingering in blood on the ground and seized it. Immediately knowing the current location of his target. Found you. He flickered away in Shunpa, chasing the would-be assassin. Meanwhile, Soifun frowned at the Onmitsukido agent who had been observing the assassination attempt. She'd just received news of the plan's failure. Jin. She hissed angrily. How did he do that? She'd scheduled the attempt at night immediately after she'd received word that Unohana had left the area. As luck would have it, Hisagi Shuhei was the one guarding Tozen, rather than Kamamura Taicho, which had drastically increased the chances of success. A surprise knockout worked much better on Fukuteicho than they did on Taicho. Given how Tozen had seemed to be of like-minded opinion to Soifun herself based on his previous conversation with Unohana, the 2nd Division Taicho had figured that the blind traitor would not interfere. But Jin? Jin should have been asleep, and even had he not been asleep, he should not have been able to sense the agent with his still recovering powers, and even if he had managed that miracle, it was outright ludicrous to think that Jin would find the strength to leave the bed, call his Zanpakuto to him, and then use Shirkai. But that was exactly what Jin had done. He'd paid for it, true, but Soifun's first and best attempt on Hinamori's life had been foiled. Now Seoul society would be on alert, security would be tightened, and all further attempts would be far more difficult. Soifun had half a mind to assassinate Jin next, should he survive the night, but his power was needed as a possible counter against Kurosaki. Against someone with the powers of a kami, Jin's Kamishini no Yari would be quite helpful. Kurosaki could hardly be expected to anticipate and block a spear through his heart from kilometers away. As it was, Soifun had just lost a good agent. The assassin she'd sent to kill Hinamori was under orders that if he should fail, then he was to consume a suicide pill in a nearby river. The pill would rapidly accelerate the decomposition of his body into Reisher, and the river would wash away the rest of the evidence. Just in case of such a scenario, the agent had also been ordered to wear clothing that would not associate him with the Onmitsukido, and all records of his existence had been removed. Soifun scowled as she sat heavily. Her next plan would require some critical thinking, and perhaps some created opportunities. I need a distraction large enough and urgent enough to lure all the Taicho away. That also gives me some plausible deniability. The question is, what could do such a thing? The only time I know of was Aizen. Soifun began to smile, she had an idea. But in the meantime, she now felt Hitsugaya's Ryatsu nearby. And now, a chance to appear completely uninvolved. She shunpaed out, preparing to join him. DMN it. Hitsugaya cursed aloud, staring at floating clothes in a nearby river. His lock on the spiritual energy of the assassin had faded almost entirely less than a minute prior, and all that remained were on those clothes, and even that last trace was dissipating rapidly. Sit upon the frozen heavens, Hirinmaru. With a single wave his shirkai, the clothes and a large part of the river froze in ice. With any luck, it would preserve the clothes and the Ryatsu on them. Also, the shirkai release would undoubtedly attract attention from the other Taicho and should be enough to bring at least one more to him. Hitsugaya materialized the Ryuraku again and searched, but even as he did he knew it was in vain. Whoever it had been, the attacker was dead, and there were only two ways that Hitsugaya knew of that could completely destroy the body in such a short amount of time without unleashing enough Ryatsu to be sensed easily. Soifun's shirkai, and an advanced suicide pill. It had to have been a Shinigami, Hitsugaya thought with narrowed eyes. It was obviously an advanced form of Shunpa. But who has the audacity to attempt to kill Hinamori when she's under the protection of so many Taicho? Hitsugaya thought back to Jin's description, trying to place what it reminded him of. Dark clothes, silent, suppressed Ryatsu, no Zanpakuto. His eyes widened. No Zanpakuto. Every Shinigami in the Godiai 13 carries their Zanpakuto. But then, what about Onmitsukido? They specialize in Hakuda. Hitsugaya frowned uneasily. He had no way to tell whether they were Onmitsukido clothes or not. Perhaps it would be a good idea to talk to Soifan. But if she was the one to kill him, then that could pose a problem as well. As if his thoughts had summoned her, he felt Soifan Shunpa a few meters behind and to his left. Hitsugaya Taicho. I felt your shurikai just now, is something wrong? Soifan Taicho, there was an attempt on Hinamori Fukatecho's life approximately 10 to 15 minutes ago, the ice user explained quickly. I tracked the assassin using Ryuraku, but too late it seems. He gestured towards the frozen clothes. His body has been completely destroyed. Soifan inspected the clothes closely. These are similar to the uniforms of the militia branch of Onmitsukido. Please remove the ice, Hitsugaya Taicho, I need to examine the clothing more closely. Hitsugaya merely waved his sword and the ice shattered. Thank you. Soifan made a show of feeling the fiber before testing its weight and durability. This is definitely not one of my uniforms, she concluded. I believe someone may be trying to frame the Onmitsukido, and by extension, myself. Alternatively, this could have been a rogue, over-enthusiastic Onmitsukido agent attempting to make certain that Aizen's influence over the Godei 13 is no more. I shall perform an inspection on my troops in the morning. Hitsugaya nodded in acknowledgement, watching as Soifan looked over the articles of clothing for something, even lightly sniffing it. There are no holes, she determined. Nor is there a scent of poison upon it, though it's possible that any traces of poison would have been washed away. Considering that when put together, these fabrics cover the entire body, it is likely that the perpetrator took an advanced suicide pill. I had come to the same conclusion, Hitsugaya agreed, slightly impressed by Soifan's display of investigative skill. Soifan frowned. Suicide pills of this level are not available to most Shinigami. The Onmitsukido have a stock commission from Kuratsuchi Taicho, but very few indeed have access to it. Please excuse me, Hitsugaya Taicho, I must check on them immediately. The 10th Division Taicho nodded swiftly, and Soifan picked up the faux uniform and Shunpa away. It was only after she was out of sight that she allowed herself a smirk. Perfect. Hitsugaya looked at the river, thoughts racing. If it wasn't one of the Onmitsukido. Kuratsuchi makes the suicide pill. But what Shinigami would do such a thing without his Zanpakuto? Whoever it was proved he or she was dedicated to killing Hinamori and only retreated once it was evident he would fail. But in such a case, it's counterproductive for a Shinigami to not bring his Zanpakuto, just in case. Unless it wasn't a Shinigami. But if it wasn't a Shinigami, then but maybe a mod soul in a Jigai. That was a very troubling thought. All the mod souls had been confiscated and destroyed, to the best of Soul Society's knowledge. The closest thing would be Nimue, Kuratsuchi's daughter and Fukatecho, created from the combined technology of Jigai and Jiken. Both Kuratsuchi and Urahara would have the ability to create a mod soul that could emulate Shinigami Shunpa. And they could both devise a suicide pill capable of destroying the body and Ryatsu. But why would one or both of them go after Hinamori? Hitsugaya shook his head and paced a few meters back and forth, trying to force his genius brain to get the answers like it always had. What does Hinamori have that they don't? Think. What's changed that they would go after her now, rather than when there was perfect opportunity while all the Taicho had left Soul Society? What's changed, Toshiro? The Taicho suddenly froze in place, his brain having clicked. Aizen. She's the last known person that Aizen actively used an illusion on. Kuratsuchi and Urahara are both scientists. Could one or both be trying to reverse engineer Kyoka Suigetsu? Without warning, Hitsugaya's brain flashed back to the recent meeting of the Taicho. Flashback. I could, make some mental adjustments. Kuratsuchi offered. End flashback. Kuratsuchi never simply offers his services unless he's interested in something. He usually has to be ordered by Yamamoto Soteicho. Hitsugaya mentally snarled as anger and betrayal filled his being. Kuratsuchi, he whispered, his voice trembling in rage, the hand holding Hyarinmura clenching as he struggled to keep his Ryatsu from flaring and betraying his killing intent. Hitsugaya's Zanpakuto roared his support in its wielder's mind, thirsting to slay that which had brought such hot fires of anger and hate within Hitsugaya's inner world. Hitsugaya was a hair's breadth from accidentally entering Bankai. As it was, the river, grass and trees within a 3-meter radius around him had frozen solid. "I'll prove it was you, and kill you myself." Kairaku Shunsui sighed as he lay on the grass under a tree near his division's barracks, looking up at the heavens. "The sky sure is pretty tonight," he commented quietly. "It's a nice night to think, and I could use all the extra help I can get right now. Perhaps you could bounce some ideas off me, Shunsui," Yukitake Jushiro's voice offered, stepping into the clearing. Seeing Kairaku's mild surprise, Yukitake smiled wryly at his old friend. "Shunsui, you've been going to this tree to think for decades. It wasn't hard to find you." Kairaku chuckled. "Well, if you're offering, Jushiro. I'm trying to figure out how to deal with Tozen and Jin. I want to at least give Jin back his Taicho position. He only lost it because he figured the only way to beat Aizen was to stab him in the back, as we wouldn't believe it until Aizen did something against us. But if I don't punish him at all, the Central 46 will, and they're likely to execute him. Alright. What have you thought of so far for punishments you could live with? Taking away his pay for a few years, temporarily removing some of his rights as Taicho, binding his Ryuryoku for a while, putting him in some form of house arrest that would allow him to do his duties as a Taicho but not much else." Kairaku listed. Alone, each of them didn't sound like enough, but together, it seems like too much to put Jin through. He did what he felt he had to do. How can I punish him harshly for that? Would execution be better? Yukitake pointed out. Kairaku looked at his best friend sourly. I hate it when you use logic while I'm having a moral crisis. Consider it comeuppance for not doing your own paperwork for Kami knows how long, Yukitake joked lightly. Seriously though, I think you might actually be doing Jin a favor if you combine those punishments. How do you mean? Well, it's not like anyone's going to trust him for a while, Yukitake reminded him. Putting him under house arrest except to do his job would protect both him and those who would harass him. True. Kairaku murmured thoughtfully. Taking away his source of income for a year isn't exactly going to hurt him, especially if you bind his Ryuryoku. Those with lower power don't eat as much, especially when they are not doing very much, so combining those with the house arrest cancels out realistically, but politically it appears as though you're punishing him very thoroughly, Yukitake finished. Kairaku broke out into a broad smile. Ah, what would I do without you? Be buried in a pit dug for you by all your previous conquests, reciting bad poetry as they pile dirt on you, the white-haired Taicho quipped instantly. Hey! I'll have you know my poetry is quite good. Kairaku protested, though the grin on his face betrayed his amusement. It certainly helped me with the girls back in the academy. That it did, Yukitake admitted. So, Jin is taken care of. What are your thoughts for Tozen? Well, there are 3 big issues, the easygoing acting Soteicho replied. First, Tozen did betray us all for his own goals, which were decidedly anti-soul society. Secondly, Tozen went so far as to seek and gain the forbidden hollow powers. But thirdly, Kamamura Taicho has asked for leniency and has given his word that while Tozen does despise the Central 46, he understands that times are changing and so too will our government. I'm inclined to grant Kamamura's request, mostly because while Tozen does have his share of the blame, it was our government that drove him to it. Having Tozen with us will certainly bring the truth out to the Central 46 that simply having hollow powers does not make them hollows, Yukitake conceded. But there's something more to it, isn't there? Kairaku sighed again. Jushiro, you know the Kurosaki kid better than I do. Do you honestly think he'll attack Soul Society? Not unless he's provoked, Yukitake answered easily. And that's just it. Once the Central 46 convenes. Don't you think they're going to be scared shitless by the idea of a visit of Ichigo's power, especially since he can't be sensed if he doesn't want to be? Of course. They'll inquire about Ichigo's loyalty, and as soon as it comes out that he was taught by exiles, has Arrancar and Vizard friends, and has subverted our own forces into being loyal to him first. Yucatec paled, immediately getting the implications. The Central 46 would think he was gathering an army, and put us at war with him. Bingo. If we were lucky, the least he would do is pull an Aizen and slaughter all of them. There was no humor in Kairaku's normally playful expression as he looked Yucatec straight in the eyes. So I'm trying to avoid that, just as hard as I can. Kurosaki's allies would not look nearly so bad if he were part of Soul Society. We could spin it as Soul Society spies in external circles or something. That's my other big reason for letting Tozen regain his position. There's another chance of getting that last Taicho approval for making Kurosaki a part-time Taicho. But if that doesn't work, there's more than one way to do it. So I'm going to the living world tomorrow to persuade Kurosaki to take the Taicho proficiency test. Hopefully he listens to reason. If he agrees, I'm going to send Nanao-chan to him to teach him what he needs to know so he can pass, before the Central 46 convenes. Even if he fails, then it would still go a long way. What can I do to help? Yucatec asked seriously. Aside from finding a way to abolish the Central 46. Kairaku clarified. Figure out a plausible reason for Ichigo not being technically a part of the Godai 13, just in case. Or create a crisis that extends our martial law a little longer so we can find a way out of this mess. Stepping through a garganta that opened above his house, Ichigo removed his Jillian mask and sighed tiredly. He'd left his orders that no hollow of any Minos class, Jillian, Ajuchas, or Vastolord, were to enter Karakura town unless it were a dire emergency and his presence was needed. Anything needed in the meantime was to be handled through Okiura, Nell, Stark and Haribel, who would contact him if necessary. Ichigo planned to make weekly visits to check on things for the time being. He was rather interested in how Stark was going to convert Las Noches into a hollow sanctuary. But right now, the Vizard just wanted to sleep. He'd woken up as Kurosaki Ichigo, Transcendent Vizard, and had somehow ended up as King of Hueco Mundo. What next? Ichigo mused humorlessly. Spirit King. Perhaps in time. I think he was kidding, Zangetsu. But I was not. We are far stronger, far more evolved than any Shinigami, Hollow, Vizard or Arrancar we have witnessed thus far. We defeated Aizen, whose ambition was to take the Spirit King's place. Are we not closer than any other being in existence? Ichigo groaned, climbing in through his window and re-entering his comatose body on the bed. That particular discussion could wait for another night. Ichigo had too many problems in the present to focus on the future just yet. Before he closed his eyes to succumb to sleep, however, he turned his head upwards and gave a fervent plea to any deity listening. Please, please, let tomorrow be dull and have nothing to do with spiritual matters. You do know that's probably not gonna happen, right? Ichigo sighed again as he rolled onto his side and closed his eyes. Yeah. I know. He felt Cazador shift a bit, as though coming to a decision. Alright, listen up. You've been a kick-ass king, Ichigo, so let me give you a little advice. Ichigo said nothing, but Cazador knew he had the Vizard's attention. You're too wary of letting your guard slip to enjoy being alone. Spend your time with those you trust to watch your back for you. Strangely enough, that made a level of sense to Ichigo. His problem was that he was physically on the edge all the time, ready for combat on a moment's notice. Since Ichigo was having difficulty finding relaxation alone, perhaps he would have better luck in a friendly game with his friends. Ha! Thanks, Cazador. I'll look into that. Ichigo got an impression of Cazador smirking at him, but the Vizard ignored his inner hollow in favor of finally getting some sleep. A dimension away, Kuratsuchi Mayuri grinned widely at the monitor in front of him in the 12th Division. How interesting. Chapter 36, Leadership. The morning following the incident, Unohana was exhausted. 3 times Jin had been almost stable, and 3 times his vitals had plummeted the instant she began to think he was out of danger. Jin's Ryoryoku had been overstressed and unstable due to Jin's forced use of Bankai with a life-threatening injury, and he'd essentially repeated the feat, this time with Shirkai. A compounded Ryoryoku injury was extremely difficult to treat, as conventional healing Kido restored the patient's Ryoryoku and worked with it to heal the body. As Ryoryoku was quite literally a Shinigami's life force, such a method typically worked astoundingly well in keeping the patient alive while addressing the wound. But this time, the wound was not to Jin's body, but to his Ryoryoku itself. He'd overstressed his power, and it was beginning to fail to maintain his vital functions. Unohana had had to use her own Ryatsu and manually keep Jin alive until her Fukatecho, Kotetsu Aisane, had arrived to do the same, leaving Unohana able to perform the delicate procedure. It was difficult, very difficult, to guide someone else's power into a healing state, and there were several ways it could go horribly wrong. But Unohana had had centuries to perfect her healing prowess, and so when she left the operating room that morning, she was tired but triumphant. Jin would survive. Just to be sure he would not risk compounding his condition another time over, Unohana had also put him into a medical coma that would last for the next several days unless removed prematurely. The next pressing issue was Hinamori. It was clearly apparent that her life was truly in danger, by Kurosaki Ichigo or by some unknown entity was unclear, but in either case additional precautions were warranted. Though Unohana was still certain that Kurosaki and his group were not behind the assassination attempt, a sliver of doubt had wriggled its way into her mind. Was Hinamori-chan right? Is Kurosaki after her? She resolved to speak with Hitsugaya Taicho at the earliest opportunity and determine what he had discovered. In the meantime, she needed to arrange better protection. Whoever it was had apparently effortlessly surprised and knocked out Hiseigai Fukatecho, and would have succeeded in killing Hinamori-chan had Jin-san not performed his self-mutilating act of protection. But considering that it was simply not practical to have a Taicho guarding her full time, Tozen was an exception, as with his hollow powers and Taicho-level abilities, it was simply asking for trouble to not place a high-level guard. The protections would have to be based in Kido. For now, however, Unohana could not afford to leave Hinamori alone. Aisane-chan. Hi, Taicho, the Fukatecho responded instantly. Kotetsu Aisane was tired as well, but she was also aware that there were many things that had to be done before she could rest. Please contact the 11th Division to set up a guard rotation around Hinamori-chan's room, and prepare a mirror door inside to prevent any further unwanted intrusions. Hi. At the same time, Kairaku was quickly making his way to the Senkamen. He wanted to catch Ichigo quickly. There was precious little time before the Central 46 would reconvene. He'd woken painfully early, much to his Nanao-chan's stunned astonishment, already visited the 12th Division and had his limiter seal applied and a jigai procured. Strangely though, Kairaku found himself somewhat apprehensive. His upcoming conversation with the substitute Shinigami would shape events to come for some time, this he was well aware of. He'd spent the necessary wait time at the 12th Division planning how he would broach the subject, but the Taicho had found himself unable to figure out a way to make it work. We'll get to it, Kairaku reassured himself. Just some small talk, maybe over some tea or sake, and everything will fall into place. I just hope the Central 46 doesn't find out I'm doing this, or it could make things very complicated. If the Central 46 discovered the lengths Kairaku was going to at this moment, it would severely hamper any argument they could make that Ichigo wasn't a threat. Kairaku, as acting Sotecho, by all rights should have simply summoned Ichigo to Soul Society if Ichigo were a respectable member of the Godiai. To instead go out of his way to meet the Vizard on his own turf was indicative of the opposite, that Ichigo was on par or superior to Kairaku in status. Every little thing is about status to those nobles, Kairaku grumbled with a sigh. But it was unfortunately the truth. Ichigo, for better or for worse, could be considered the ruler of Karakura town, spiritually speaking. No one knew whether Soul Society could or would even attempt to enforce anything if Ichigo put his foot down, especially with his transcendent strength. Worse still, as Hitsugaya Taicho had pointed out during their meeting the other night, Ichigo had several perfectly valid reasons to hate Soul Society. What it came down to, was that the two of them would be discussing relations between Soul Society and Ichigo's group. Kairaku stopped in front of the giant double doors that marked the gateway between worlds. Open the Senkamen. The Shinigami stationed there saluted sharply and began doing as ordered. A Jigukucho was presented to Kairaku, and he nodded silently. The Jigukucho would allow him to go directly to the living world without having to make his way through the Dainai. Several minutes later, Kairaku stepped through the Senkamen in the living world, the butterfly fluttering away. Taking a moment to attempt to sense Ichigo's Ryatsu, he was pleasantly surprised to find that he could in fact locate it. Perhaps keeping his Ryatsu in a transcended state is mentally draining. The acting Soteicho theorized while entering his Jigai. When he was finished, Kairaku stretched his legs and arms, acclimating to his new body. He was dressed in black slacks and a long-sleeved button-up light blue shirt, with a dark navy blue jacket over it, left open. He had foregone a hat this time on the 12th Division's suggestion, so instead a long, colorful scarf adorned his neck, with reds and yellows as the prominent hues. Fully adjusted, Kairaku set off at a brisk walk. Ichigo was just finishing breakfast with the rest of his family when he sensed a familiar presence heading his way. But it was not so familiar that he knew who it was immediately. Nor if they were friendly or otherwise. It was a Shinigami, that was for certain, but Ichigo couldn't tell anything else. He sighed. Of course, I can't get a single day to myself without something spiritual. Might as well get used to it, Ichigo. I don't think that's ever gonna change. Ichigo gave a mental glare at his hollow half before getting up from the table, turning to face the doorway. Thanks for breakfast, Yuzu. His little sister smiled warmly. I'm glad you liked it, Ichi and I. Then she saw Ichigo's expression. Is something wrong? Ichigo's eyes didn't leave the door. Just an unwanted visitor coming our way. Stay inside for another few minutes. Is it, a hollow? Yuzu whispered. The wizard suddenly realized that he was accidentally scaring his sister. No. It's one of the good guys, the Shinigami. Then why is the Shinigami unwanted? Ichigo blinked. Yuzu was still too young and too naive to understand all the nuances of complicated relationships. He was about to open his mouth, but Karen interrupted with a half-bored, half-irritated expression on her face, her eyes closed as if trying to ward off stupidity. Yuzu, the Shinigami is coming to see Ichigo, meaning that something stupid has happened or is going to happen and they probably want help. She opened one eye and gave her fraternal twin a, you should already know this, look. So while the Shinigami is a good guy, Ichigo doesn't want him visiting because that means more trouble. Uhu, Yuzu acknowledged, nodding her head. Stay out of trouble, Ichi and I. I'll try, Ichigo agreed, impressed at how Karen had succinctly explained the basics of his working relationship with most of the Shinigami forces in a way that Yuzu could work with. He headed for the door, picking up his school bag and slinging it over his shoulder. See you later. Have a good day, Ichi and I. Karen merely waved an acknowledgement, but Ichigo knew she wished him well too. As soon as he had left the house, Ichigo's expression changed as he put on his typical scowl, eyes serious. He was half tempted to simply put his Ryatsu in its transcended state and evade the Shinigami for the rest of the day, but Ichigo knew he would have to deal with them at some point. Instead, Ichigo began walking towards the presence. Several minutes later, he spotted the Shinigami in question, though he was hard to recognize without his pink haori and straw hat. Kairaku Taicho. Kurosaki-san, Kairaku greeted warmly, before his voice lowered. I apologize for interrupting what must be a busy schedule, but this is rather urgent. Is there someplace we can sit and talk privately? I expect our conversation may take some time. Ah. Ichigo thought quickly, momentarily lamenting how his teacher was going to kill him for skipping school again. Then again. Follow me. Ichigo led the Shinigami Taicho back to his home and asked him to wait momentarily. Quickly going up to his room and opening the closet, Ichigo was entirely unsurprised to see a sleeping lion plush atop Rukia's mattress. He poked him in the eye. Ow. Ichigo, what the? Kon shut up immediately upon seeing how serious Ichigo was. Kon, I need you to go to school for me today. No crazy antics this time, he warned. Fine, but I expect to see Rukia soon. Ichigo gently pressed his Shinigami badge against the plush, popping out the green pill form of the mod soul, and then quickly tossed it into his own mouth. A moment later, he emerged from his body in his soul form, with Kon in control of his body. Before the substitute could open his mouth to threaten Kon with what he would do if the mod soul misbehaved, Kon merely sighed and waved his hand. I know. If I do something that gets you in trouble, I get the Bostov treatment again. See ya, Ichigo. With that, the mod soul leapt out the window, closely followed by Ichigo himself. Sorry about the wait, Ichigo apologized to Kairaku as Kon ran to school. I don't normally have much use for my Jikongan, so I don't bother to keep him around. It's no problem, Kairaku waved away easily. I understand entirely. I'm afraid I don't have a private office or anything like that, but my home and Inoue's home have become the traditional meeting places for when we need to work with Soul Society, Ichigo explained as he opened the door to his home again. We should have enough privacy here. Not to mention, I am not showing him the Vizard warehouse, and I think he might have a problem with Urahara's shop. As fortune would have it, Yuzu and Karen had left for school before Ichigo and Kairaku had arrived, and Isshin was already busy in the clinic, leaving the Vizard and Shinigami to meet in private. Ichigo moved into the kitchen to heat the kettle for some tea, and then sat across from Kairaku at the table. So, why are you here? Ichigo asked directly, hoping to get to the point. If something happened, Soul Society normally sends Renji or Rukia. The way I understand it, you're one of the most respected and senior Taicho, so why are you here in person? Kairaku was taken aback by Ichigo's abrupt directness, but took it as an opportunity to speak candidly. The reason I'm the one here, rather than Aburai Renji or Kachiki Rukia, is due to the situation at hand. There is what many would consider a problem, and unfortunately for all sides concerned, the many are Soul Society's government. That problem, is you. The Vizard narrowed his eyes. And just how is that? Kairaku coughed politely, hiding his discomfort about Ichigo's suddenly intimidating expression. What do you know about Soul Society's government? There is the Gotei 13, made up 13 divisions, all of which have Taicho, and they all answer to the Soteicho. There's a Kido Corps, and the Onmitsukido, which I don't know anything about. I know that everyone obeys a group of people called the Central 46, who supposedly got their authority directly from the Spirit King according to Aizen. The Central 46 attempted to kill the Vizard 100 years ago when they accidentally gained hollow powers, and were killed by Aizen so he could try to execute Rukia by Sokayaku, Ichigo summarized. The acting Soteicho nodded. As you've probably surmised by now, the previous Central 46 was a group of xenophobes who had grown secure in their power and could not move with the times. In all honesty, Aizen probably did us a favor when he killed them, but don't tell anyone I said that. Ichigo snorted in amusement and nodded. Just then, the kettle rang, and Ichigo rose to pour them some tea. When he'd sat down again, he resumed where they'd left off. You were saying, about the Central 46. Yes. Kairaku sipped his tea, thinking how to best describe the situation. While Aizen was a threat, the Gotei 13 took over control of Soul Society. But now that Aizen is dead, we have to put our affairs in order and give control back to the new Central but, given the history of the Central 46. You're worried they'll overreact to hearing about me, Ichigo stated bluntly, setting down his own tea. Shinigami with hollow powers, strong enough to kill Aizen when none of the rest of you could. If they're even close to as xenophobic or power-hungry as their predecessors, then they would order you to execute me by any means necessary, wouldn't they? Sadly, yes, Kairaku agreed. Kurosaki-san, you have many supporters in Soul Society, amongst nobles and Taicho and officers alike. The Vizard are your allies, and you have friends in Hueco Mundo as well as your group of empowered humans. To put it bluntly, politically it looks like you're gathering an army, and that scares a lot of people. You're simply too strong, and it's unreasonable and frankly impossible for us to seal your power away, since you've transcended our understanding. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have some solution, Ichigo observed with narrowed eyes. We need a way for you to appear as though you're loyal to Soul Society, Kairaku explained. It increases the chances of the Central 46 being lenient as they'll see your supporters as to their benefit. Get to the point. As you wish. Kairaku set down his tea and looked his companion directly in the eyes. I want you to become Taicho of the 5th Division. Ichigo stared at the Taicho disbelievingly. You can't be serious. I am very serious, Kurosaki-san. If the Central 46 gives the order to have you killed, many of the Godii 13 will rebel. Others will not and would stop at nothing to have you killed. Soul Society and Karakura would become a battlefield. Having just fought a war, Kurosaki-san, are you really so eager to enter another? I should be asking you the same question, Ichigo said dangerously. Is Soul Society really so eager as to challenge someone whose power is beyond their comprehension, with an army at his back? I will not tolerate a threat to my home. Of course not, and no one expects you to, Kairaku denied quickly, carefully watching Ichigo's eyes. Black tendrils were beginning to creep along his left eye, overtaking the normal white. He's angry, and defensive. But I have to make him understand. But we answer to the Central 46, and they do not understand the horror of war, nor do I think they will understand that you do not pose a threat to our home. Closing his eyes, Ichigo took a deep, calming breath and forced himself to relax in his chair. After another few moments, he decided what his next question should be. He opened his eyes, and Kairaku was relieved that they were back to normal. Why not just abolish the Central 46? You've been doing fine without them, right? It's a question I've considered myself, the acting Sotecho concurred, glad that the topic had strayed away from war. He took another sip of tea before continuing. The problem is that we have to be legal about it if we want to maintain our benevolent image, which is necessary for us to continually gain new recruits through the Rakongai. I have Yukitake Taicho looking into it right now, but I do not expect much. They sat in silence for a minute, drinking their tea pensively. Are there really no other options? Ichigo finally questioned. None that I could think of, Kairaku admitted. Not outside you attending the Shinigami Academy, and quite frankly, that would be rather pointless. If a noble family adopted you, that would be something, but I have no influence with them. He set his tea down again. Kurosaki-san, you seem very opposed to my offer. May I ask why that is? Now it was Ichigo's turn to delay for time as he took another sip. I disagree with Soul Society's policies, he finally said. In the short year that I've been involved in spiritual events, I've learned the fate of any being who doesn't subscribe to Soul Society's definition of normal. The Vizard were to be executed but were instead exiled thanks to Urahara and Yoruchi. The Quincy were massacred to almost the last man because their leaders were much the same as your Central 46 stubborn and foolish, according to Ishida. The Bount and Mod Souls were sentient beings created by Soul Society, but they too were killed without mercy for no fault of their own. I was given power by Rukia to protect my family, and in return I am cut down by Byakuya and left to die. Ichigo shook his head. I don't want to be chained to the will of people who are unwilling to see things from another perspective. Another problem is that I have no guarantee that what happened to the Vizard won't also happen to me, Ichigo continued. If I work in Soul Society, it becomes that much easier to end my life. Here in Karakura, there are very few Shinigami and I am familiar with every one of them. But if I had to sum it up in one phrase, it would be, I don't trust you. I see, Kairaku murmured. And he truly did. I don't really trust the Central 46 either. But then, he got a wicked idea from what Ichigo had said. He began to smile. Then let's cheat. Huh? Ichigo blurted, confused. If there is anything my Zanpakuto has taught me, it is that there is always a chance to cheat, to play the loopholes, Kairaku stated with a smirk. The Central 46 will find out one way or another that you have hollow powers. We can't avoid that. We also can't choose who will be in the Central 46, nor can we unduly influence their positions. But right now, the Gotei 13 still has control of Seoul society. It's our move. So instead of trying to pacify them, let's silence them. What? How do you plan to do that? Despite himself, Ichigo was interested. Kairaku's smirk just grew bigger. This is going to be fun. We changed the rules. Hitsugaya was hard at work with more paperwork when he heard a knock on the door. Looking up and privately glad for the distraction, he set the papers he was working on aside. Come in. Soifun stepped in quickly and confidently. I just felt you should know that I have performed my inspection, none of my onmitsukido is unaccounted for. I am continuing the investigation, but as you were first on the scene, do you have any information that could be of use? Hitsugaya shook his head, his face stony. The only information I have that you may not know is that the perpetrator did not carry his zanpakudo. I'm sure you are already aware that Jin held the assassin back at great harm to himself. The assassin nodded, she was well aware. My sources reported that to me as well. I will consult Kuratsuchi Taicho to determine who else has access to high-level suicide pills. She swept out the door before Hitsugaya could say anything more. The ice user sighed and looked at his paperwork. Soifun's visit had reawakened the emotions of the previous night to a lesser degree, but Hitsugaya knew he couldn't continue his work. I won't be able to focus. I should see Hinamori. See how she is. And tell Anohana Taicho what happened last night, in any case. He stood and quietly left, taking his time on his walk to the 4th Division so he could cool his head a little. I'll drop by the 12th Division later so I can get my seal and Jigai to go talk to Kurosaki. Several minutes later, Hitsugaya entered the 4th Division barracks, and immediately spotted one of the people he wanted to speak with. Anohana Taicho. The head healer turned towards him and Hitsugaya found himself in a private room almost before he could blink. What happened last night? She asked quickly. The assassin committed suicide before I could reach him, using a pill that dissolved his body entirely, Hitsugaya informed. Soifun is interrogating Kuratsuchi to determine who all has access to them. How's Jin? Unohana sighed heavily. He'll pull through, but I had to put him in an induced healing coma, and it's too risky to wake him for more details. Does Hinamori know what happened? Unohana shook her head negatively. No, I felt the knowledge would only hinder her recovery process, especially as she fears Kurosaki-san coming to claim her. Right, Hitsugaya murmured, but now his thoughts were taking a different turn. Would Kurosaki have an idea of who would be doing this? It was a strange idea, but Kurosaki had a variety of friends in strange places. Vizard, Arankar, Urahara and Yoruchi. Perhaps he's heard something, or one of his friends has a useful ability that could help. Something else to ask him when I talk to him today. Hitsugaya Taicho. HM. Oh, sorry, the diminutive Taicho apologized. Just had a thought that I should look into later. Is it possible for me to see Hinamori? Now. Unohana gave him a sympathetic look. He looks entirely too young to be shouldering such burdens. But he's proven himself up to the challenge quite admirably. Yes, follow me. As they were walking towards Hinamori's room, she spoke quietly to her comrade. Remember, Hitsugaya Taicho, try to avoid the sensitive topics, and make sure she knows you're her friend and still support her. Hitsugaya nodded, his throat dry as they approached the guards in front of Hinamori's room. Passing through and entering the room itself, Hitsugaya was unsurprised to see a mirror door set up. Shiro-chan. Hinamori cried in pleasant surprise, seeing her old friend and standing up. It's Hitsugaya Taicho, Hitsugaya grumbled good-naturedly. I'll leave you two alone, Unohana suggested, and left a moment later. Hitsugaya sat down in the chair available to him. Momo, are you okay? It was the first time he'd used her given name in a long time, but he had really worried about her. Hinamori smiled. I'm fine, Shiro-chan. I'm all better, see? She stretched exaggeratedly, popping a few joints. Unohana Taicho told me you tried to see me a couple of times. Sorry I wasn't awake. It's all right, the white-haired Taicho reassured his best friend. You needed to heal. Shiro-chan. Do you know why Unohana Taicho put up a mirror door? Hinamori asked concernedly. Did something happen? She told me that you were afraid that Kurosaki was going to come get you, Hitsugaya related. The mirror door is probably for your benefit. Kurosaki has almost no experience in Kido, and the amount of power he'd need to break it would be easy to detect and intercept, so it's the perfect defense. Nothing he'd said was a lie, the mirror door was for her benefit, and it was a good defense against Kurosaki. But he still felt a twinge of guilt for omitting the attempt on her life last night. Ah, that does make me feel better, Hinamori admitted. So, what's new? Well, Matsumoto actually did all of her paperwork for a change the other night. Hinamori gasped aloud. Really? I was pretty surprised too. Hitsugaya agreed, drawing her into the intrigue and away from troubling topics. I've been thinking about it but I can't come up with any good ideas on what changed. I really need to know so I know whether it was a one-time thing or if she's finally being a little responsible. Can you think of anything that it could be? Well. Meanwhile, Soifun was talking to Kuratsuchi Taicho, who seemed rather disinterested. I need to know who has access to those suicide pills. Which suicide pills? Mayuri asked dispassionately, still staring at his computer screen. The body disintegrating type. You'll need to be a little more specific. Soifun couldn't believe the man was being so unhelpful. And when she thought about it, she felt a wave of disgust for the scientist. He'd created more than one type of body disintegrating suicide pills. Well, I don't have any more specifics, Soifun snapped. All I know is that the man's body was completely disintegrated, with his clothes left in a river. Ah, the clothes were left untouched. One of the earlier versions, then, Mayuri decided. Nimue. Hi, the quiet girl responded emotionlessly. Fetch the records for who has access to our suicide pills, types 1076 to 1312. Hi, Taicho. She left the room immediately. 237 types of body disintegrating suicide pills. Soifun thought in disbelief. And he knows them well enough to simply spout the numbers. Now then, Soifun Taicho. I do believe I have information you would be interested in hearing, Mayuri brought up with a smile, finally turning from his monitor. It appears that Kurosaki Ichigo left the living world for a few hours last night by way of Garganta. Hardly surprising. He was probably visiting the Arrancar who worked with us against Aizen, Soifun replied, completely uninterested. She'd anticipated that happening sooner or later. There is more, however. In the aftermath of the fight with Aizen, there is a great deal of leftover Ryuryoku in the air of Karakura. Accordingly, there had been a few jillion appearances in Karakura, which were promptly taken care of. However, not one Minos-class hollow has appeared since Kurosaki left. That caught Soifun's interest. Do you think perhaps he went on a hunting mission? It's possible. Probable, even, Mayuri assessed. I'm curious what happens if a wizard eats hollows like they do. I also want to know whether he prefers eating them or simply purifying them like any other Shinigami. Next time you spy on him, let me know and I'll give you a monitoring device for you to subtly plant. Very well. Inwardly, Soifun was quite pleasantly surprised. You found something that works even if his Ryatsu is in its transcended state. I won't know for certain until it is tested, but I have my confidence that it will work, Mayuri said confidently, turning back to the monitor. In the meantime, there is something very interesting going on that I really must attend to. Nimue. Where are those records? Right here, sir. Soifun almost jumped. Nimue might very well have been an assassin herself, the way she'd snuck up on them. Then again, she mused, that was probably the intent. Kuratsuchi wanted an assistant who would blend into the background when he didn't want her, and would be able to take care of whatever he needed done without complaint. Give them to Soif and Taicho, and then go have a look at our experiments, see if there are any unplanned changes. I am going to be quite busy for some time. Hi. Nimue quietly gave Soif and Taicho the records before walking off, just as silently as before. Just what exactly is so terribly interesting? Soifan couldn't help but ask, seeing Mayuri's devoted expression. Oh, nothing you'd be concerned about. It appears that hell is moving closer to the living world and Hueco Mundo, which is unusual enough to be interesting. That doesn't happen unless there has been a large influx of hellbound souls. I'm busy calculating the possible effects on the other known dimensions. Could the residents of hell make their way into the living world? Soifan asked. While I imagine there must be a way, there's been no recorded case of that ever happening, so the chances are slim, Mayuri answered in a bored voice. I suppose a Shinigami could enter hell and return with one of them, but not only is it forbidden to enter hell, all the records on how to do so have been destroyed to prevent the attempt. Only the Soteicho knows how, just in case, and I have yet to convince him to share the secret. A shame, too, I would so like to run some experiments on them. His eyes lit up. Oh, perhaps this latest development will help persuade him. I will need more data. Mayuri never noticed that Soifan had already left. That's interesting indeed, Kuratsuchi. Soifan thought to herself. That's an option I didn't know existed earlier. If Kurosaki threatens Soul Society, then perhaps I can persuade Yamamoto Soteicho to reveal how to open the gates of hell, and simply trap Kurosaki in there. That would be far simpler, and probably less risky, than using his mother as blackmail for any length of time. I swear I will come at you with all of my power. Soifan shivered at the haunting memory of Kurosaki's pledge. Of course, it would still be far better to have Kurosaki working for Soul Society. If only I can get Hinamori out of the way. She stopped cold in her tracks, narrowing her eyes. Hinamori doesn't need to die, just be rendered powerless until she's ready to work with the rest of Soul Society again. The maggot's nest would work well, but she's well known and of high rank, and the nest isn't meant to be common knowledge. In the next meeting I'll suggest binding her powers until such time as she can work with Kurosaki. She decided that would be her primary plan for the time being, though she would not neglect her backup plans, just in case. Hitsugaya stood, feeling much better about the day. Hinamori had brightened his spirits considerably. And, much to his surprise, she hadn't once mentioned Aizen or Kurosaki after the initial question. I'm sorry to go, Momo, but... Yeah, I know, Hinamori agreed. Duty calls. It always does. I'll try to come by tonight after dinner, if that's all right. Sure. I'm always glad to see you, Shiro-chan. Hitsugaya gave her an exasperated look. How many times do I have to tell you, it's Hitsugaya Taicho. You'll always be my Shiro-chan, Hitsugaya-kun, Hinamori said quietly. The icy Taicho melted a little. Yeah, I know, Momo. I'll always be your Shiro-chan, just like you'll always be my first and best friend. They shared a quiet smile, remembering their days as children, before the Shinigami Academy. All right. I'll see you tonight, Hinamori Fukuteicho. I look forward to it, Hitsugaya Taicho, Hinamori chirped. As soon as Hitsugaya closed the door, Hinamori slumped onto her bed, her smile fading. She'd really enjoyed her time with her childhood friend, but as soon as he was gone, the ache was back. Aizen Taicho. Why did you have to die? The door opened unexpectedly, and Hinamori was unable to hide her emotions by the time Unohana stepped inside. Good morning, Hinamori-chan, she greeted warmly. Seeing the expression on her patient's face, her smile wavered a little. Did you not enjoy your time with Hitsugaya Taicho? I can keep him out if you'd prefer. No. Hinamori blurted, then shrunk in on herself. No, please. I like talking with him. Then what's wrong? Unohana pressed gently. I'm just missing Aizen Taicho, Hinamori admitted. Why did he have to die, Anohana Taicho? Why couldn't we have just found a way to make peace? Why did Soul Society let Kurosaki kill him? Unohana hadn't expected to come across this question for some time, so it was a bit of a surprise to hear it so soon. There are a few reasons for it, she began as gently as she could. You will not like what I have to say, but I promise you that I speak only the truth as I know it. I know, Anohana Taicho, Hinamori acknowledged. You're one of the most truthful people I know. Then trust me, and hear me out before speaking, alright? Hinamori nodded. Thank you. Aizen died because he made some very poor choices, and because he attempted to sacrifice the people Kurosaki Ichigo had sworn to protect. I understand Aizen even kidnapped and threatened to kill Kurosaki-san's mother in front of him. Hinamori gasped, but said nothing yet. That can't be. No way would Aizen Taicho do that. Every report, from every Taicho and Fukuteicho available at the time, confirmed this, Unohana went on quietly. That was a very poor decision of Aizen's part. If he had not done that, then I feel it could have just as easily ended with him being taken capture, rather than killed. But Aizen made it extremely personal to Kurosaki-san. Can you say that if someone had threatened your family, you would not do the same? Do you not feel the same way towards Kurosaki-san right now? If you had had the opportunity last night, would you not have struck him down as surely as he did Aizen? Hinamori could say nothing, but the silence spoke volumes. Unohana nodded, seeing she understood. If Aizen had targeted another town, another group of people, someone else, I'm not sure if Kurosaki-san would have killed Aizen. We may never know. Why did Soul Society let Kurosaki-san kill Aizen? The reason for that lies in the deeds Aizen performed before his public betrayal. Aizen admitted to you, and you have told me, that he killed a great many people when trying to finalize his Hogyoku, and even more when experimenting with hollowification. He also killed the Central 46, and attempted to murder Kuchiki Rukia. Such things are expressly forbidden, and so Aizen committed treason. If it had been anyone else, say, Kuratsuchi Taicho who had done such things, would you have argued against killing him for treason? Hinamori swallowed hard. No, but Aizen had a higher purpose in mind. Hinamori argued. Perhaps, but do the ends justify the means? Where is the limit, Hinamori-chan? Thousands of people? Millions? Billions? How many until it becomes not worth it? I don't know, Hinamori whispered. Everyone has a different idea of what is worth it, and what isn't, Unohana told the Fukuteicho quietly. Aizen believed that replacing the Spirit King was worth sacrificing hundreds of thousands of unwilling souls. Kurosaki-san believed that saving those hundreds of thousands of souls was worth sacrificing the one soul threatening it. I believe that the only life a person has a right to sacrifice, is their own, and only then in defense of others. There are no right answers that everyone can agree upon, Hinamori-chan. You must find your own answers, and stay true to them. It is the journey of finding those answers that help us grow as people. Unohana would have reached out to hold Hinamori's hand, if it were not for the mirror door in the way. As it was, she merely pressed her hand against the glass, and was gladdened when Hinamori pressed her own hand in the same place, eyes glistening with unshed tears. But I offer my condolences for your loss, Hinamori-chan. Aizen was very special, to you especially. Death is a terrible thing, but you should take comfort that he will be reincarnated someday, and perhaps you will be with him again in your next life. For now, make him proud by growing into a person that both you and he can be proud of. Hinamori burst into tears, loudly sobbing. Without warning, the mirror door shattered and Unohana found herself holding Hinamori to her shoulder, rubbing her back soothingly as the Fukuteicho's hands clenched around her Taicho Haori.